Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided by posting on the bulletin board in Village Hall, by mail to the Ridgewood News, the Record, and by submission to all persons entitled same, as provided by law of a schedule, including the date and time of this meeting. Roll call.
Councilman Hache.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Seaton.
Here.
Councilman Voigt.
Here.
Councilwoman Walsh.
Here.
Mayor Knudsen.
Here. Please stand for the flag salute. Please join us in a moment of silence for our men and women serving our nation and our first responders. Thank you. Before we go on, I think Councilman Voigt has a few words.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. At the last meeting, I unfortunately made a derogatory comment. I thought it was under my breath, but actually it wasn't. It was caught by the audio. And I just want to apologize to the public and to the people who attended the meeting. It was offensive, and I'm sincerely sorry. So.
Thank you. Before we go to public comment, I just also want to point out on the table in the back, you'll see there are two binders that look like this. They're yellow binders. These binders contain full packet documents that the Village Council are also looking at. They're being provided as a courtesy. They are essentially in draft form. This should help individuals better understand the discussion items and the process that we're involved in here. We would like the binders to remain on the table. Residents are invited to take a look at those documents before the meeting. If you want to take a look at something during the meeting, we only ask that the binders remain on the table, and please, please, please do not remove any documents. And hopefully, if this works, we'll continue and everyone will have access to the same materials we're looking at during workshops and work sessions. And with that, we're moving on to public comment.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Justin Wittrell. I run the post-stroke and disabled support group here in Ridgewood on Tuesdays from 10 to 12.
Sir,
and
I'm sorry. May I have your address, please?
Of course. It's Justin Wittrell, W-A-T-R-E-L, and that's 506 Collins Avenue in Hasbrook Heights, New Jersey.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I wanted to come up this evening to say thank you very much to the Mayor and Council for all the support that Ridgewood gives our group. We got a lot of support last year, especially from the police department, the fire department, your cultural arts agency, and the museums. And we wanted to say thank you very much. That support means a lot to the members of our group. And the outreach has been a very, very positive one, as we've had your OEM office come in, your police chief come in, the fire department brought their inspectors in and went over different programs and things that are done here in Ridgewood that translate out to the towns that a lot of them live in. And I just wanted to say thank you from us in the group and also from the county to outreach to all of you and say thank you for that support. It means a lot to us, and not only that, but it seems to be a nice outreach to the people in this community as well, is because we're trying to bring a lot of your Hilton senior members through age-friendly Ridgewood and let them know that the programs that we're having, such as when we bring in the county lawyers, when we bring in some of our speakers from places like Social Security, Meals on Wheels, to let that outreach from the county and from the different organizations come in. So I just wanted to come up this evening and say thank you very much for that support. It's very much appreciated, and the group appreciates it as well.
Justin, before, first, we should be thanking you because it's an incredible program, and I've had the opportunity to sit and have conversation with the individuals who are at this support group. Do you want to just give a plug to your website? Because I know it's fabulous, chock full of information. It's probably a good idea.
Oh, for
the blog, whatever it is that you have.
Oh, I blog BergenCountyCaregiver.com. What it is my group started complaining that was too much information. So I put it onto a blog site. Currently, as of last year, we had 3,000 hits for adult caregivers on the blog site, and we've now attracted up to our 47th country. We just picked up Miramar, the Philippines, and Estonia. So how these people are finding that blog site, I don't know. And Mayor, I want to say thank you again for coming and talking with the group. I know how busy all of you are and how busy your schedule is, and we really appreciate that.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Good evening, Ann Loving, 342 South Irving Street. I see that you have on the agenda tonight an overview of responses to the Hudson Street parking garage RFP, and to that, I wanted to say a couple things about parking, which I haven't said anything about it in a while. First of all, I would like to thank you for all the things that you have done to try and address parking solutions, such as the central valet, the employee discount, and some of the other things that you've tried. I really appreciate all the efforts that you've put in that have been conservative and practical, cost-effective efforts. The fact that some of them have apparently been failures is still successful because you learn, that this or that didn't work. It's my understanding that, for example, employees are still not necessarily parking in the employee spots, and that the central valet wasn't highly subscribed, but you learn from that. It's my understanding, I think, that you're moving forward with increasing the number of spaces at the train station. At least that's where I thought we were, and I'm not sure if you still are, but I hope so, because that's certainly the epicenter of where commuters would want to park, is right at the train. I also certainly hope that you are planning to reconfigure and restripe the Hudson Street lot, because it has been explained to us on numerous occasions that you could get a bunch more spaces by doing that. Sometimes the argument is used that losing Brogan and Ken Smith to high-density housing is going to cause us to lose parking, but I think that's a little bit of a bogus argument, because they used to be businesses. They weren't always parking lots, they were businesses, so we got parking there for a little while, but we can't say that we're losing that. I'm in town all the time, and the cottage lot always, all caps, always has plenty of available spaces. It's no more than 3 blocks from anywhere where you might want to go in the CBD. It's really close. If you absolutely can't walk, you could catch an Uber from the cottage lot up to whatever restaurant. I am not supportive of any parking solution that involves increasing meter rates in town, or any parking solution that causes an increase in the parking time, which is currently 10 to 6. Totally opposed to, causing an additional burden by making it go longer. Also opposed to any increase in property taxes, such as a multi-million-dollar bond. I mean, with the new tax laws, we already are going to have a cap on what we can deduct. Please don't add another burden to us. And I also do not support the idea of using parking revenues, parking authority revenues, to pay for construction of something, because those revenues can be used for other things. So I just wanted to state my piece on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, just real quick on, just wanted to touch base on the train station. I believe we're still just waiting on one piece of information back from SHPO, and
Correct.
Then we move forward. Okay, great. All right, with that, we're closing public comment and moving on to presentations.
Okay, our first presentation is the results in education and lead and copper. Rich Calby, Director of Ridgewood Water, will be coming up at this time, as well as Bill Bierwas from Ridgewood Water.
Wait, you can't do it on that. You're trying to do it like a touch screen. Oh, they control it. Yeah.
Chemistry class days.
Okay, thank you. All right, good evening, Mayor, Council, members of the audience. We want to take, a little bit of time tonight. We're going to be pretty quick to review for you where we are with our lead and copper compliance. As many of you know, this was an issue that has kind of been in our target since 2012. We had an exceedance of the lead and copper rule. Since then, we've implemented a treatment program, and tonight we're going to give you the results of that program, which are very good results. So I'll start with the presentation. I don't know, Mr. Jackson, is it possible to get that full screen?
You have to move it over just a
I've, water drop. Okay. And we did our best to make sure that these slides we're going to be able to see them, but if you're in the back row, you may want to just step up a couple of rows. So we got two presentations tonight. The first is about lead and copper, and then we're going to do a presentation on the car treatment that's proposed, part of the new bond ordinance that you're considering and introduced at the last meeting. But let's start first with the lead and copper program and highlight our results. Okay. Use that. Okay. Before we get into actual results, I want to start by reviewing how lead and copper contaminants get into our water. There's two conditions that cause lead and copper contamination. Water comes in contact with materials containing lead, such as lead pipe or iron pipe lined with lead, brass fixtures or fittings, or lead solder joints. The second way is stagnation of the water, when the water sits in the piping. This allows the leaching of those metals into the water. If you eliminate either of those conditions, then you stop the corrosion. To give you a better view of that, and you really don't have to pay attention to the writing on the left, but more of the graphic. Typical home, you have plumbing within the walls to the fixtures. You have joints in that plumbing that has solder. You have fixtures, fittings, whether they're under the sink or above the sink for the faucet. And then, of course, the service line, which in itself may contain lead. It could be lead material or lead lined. So how do you get the lead out? Well, you really don't. We try to prevent it from coming in contact with the water by either replacing the material or creating a protective barrier between the water and the material. So how does Ridgewood water prevent that lead and copper from corroding out of the material? It'd be cost prohibitive to go and replace every bit of the material in a home, or in some cases to replace the entire service line. In some cases, that even disrupts the lead and copper more than you'd want it to. So it's better to provide corrosion control. The chemical we utilize is polyorthophosphate. It's a food-grade additive. The phosphate inhibits the transfer of the metal from the plumbing materials by forming a protective bond between the pipe and the water. The treatment is approved by both the State Department of Environmental Protection and the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. We fully implemented the treatment in 2016. Now, why did we implement the treatment? The lead and copper rule has action limits for both lead and copper. Lead action limit is 15 micrograms per liter. The copper limit is 1.3 milligrams per liter. If 90% of our samples if 90% of samples must be below that action limit in order for us to be in compliance. So in 2012, the 60 samples that we collected showed an exceedance of that action level. Thus, the Village of Ridgewood and Ridgewood Water were required to take action, and the corrosion control was the action that was taken to eliminate that exceedance. Here's a summary of those results through the years. You could see in 2003 through about 2005 there was compliance. The 90th percentile was below 15 parts per billion, or micrograms. 2006, 2008, there was a slight exceedance. That exceedance, from what I understand, was met through reporting to the state, and they found out there was some sample laxity and error. 2009, there was compliance, and then in 2012, a large exceedance. The 90th percentile was 21.6, way over the 15 part per billion, or microgram per liter action limit. During all these years, there was never an exceedance in the copper level. It was always the lead issue. At that time, the state required that there be no more testing. The reason they do that is because at that time they're requiring you to take action. They're assuming that you're going to fail, and even if you didn't, they're going to continue to require the action because you exceed the action limit. So fast forward to 2016, treatment was fully implemented, and you could see the instant results of that treatment. We immediately went down to 6.28, and in 2017 as low as 4 parts per billion. And just the last week, we received a letter of approval from the state recognizing these results and certifying them, and now moving back to standard monitoring. The period you see, we were required to do 2 6-month periods a year of monitoring 60 samples throughout our service area. And it may not seem a lot, but it's very difficult to get 60 homeowners to give you a sample of their water. We even used bill credits as a method to entice them, but at the end of the day, people like Mr. Birwas, Jose Martinez, and Jim Tecchio in the back of the room were actually going out on Saturdays knocking on doors to get samples, because at the end of the day, we need to provide a minimum of 60 samples within that 6-month period. Fortunately, we're able to achieve that. This is just a graphical view of the results through the years. You could see where it started, how it spiked, and where we are today with some of the lowest results ever. Same with copper. You can see the spike there in the middle years, and now at the lowest level that we've ever seen in 2017. This chart might be a little bit hard to see, but this is 10 sample homes from the 60. We're not providing any addresses, but these are scattered throughout the system. They could be in Glen Rock, Wyckoff, right here in the village, or Midland Park. You can see through the years what the results were. This is just a small representative pool where we had at least data through some of the other years, and you could see in the 2017 column, all of these are non-detect. They pretty much all went down to 0 as a result of the corrosion control treatment. So what we want to stress is that residents, commercial tenants should all still take precautions. This is nowhere near being a way of saying you don't have to worry about this anymore. You should still avoid stagnant water. Run your faucet early in the morning, or if you're away from your home for a long period of time, you want to do that at least for 15 to 30 seconds, or the best benchmark is wait until the water turns very cold. You want to use only cold water for cooking and for baby formula. Look for alternative sources or treatment of the water, including an NSF-approved filter. Most sink top filters or point-of-use filters and refrigerators are NSF approved, and they just really consist of a charcoal filter. And at the same time, you get the benefit of removing chlorine from the water if you don't like the taste or smell of that. Or you can call us. We could tell you if you have a lead service line. And last but not least, if you haven't yet, test your water. Find out what the results are for your home. If you find there's any concern, we do come out and try to help pinpoint where the source of that lead contamination or copper contamination could be. And, this could be for any home. We actually had a home in our system that was fully renovated and exceeded a lead level, and they found the contractor had utilized old solder on their truck. So I urge everybody, if you haven't, test your water. I want to thank our staff because they did spend time on weekends. A lot of commitment went into making sure we adhere to this 60 samples for the 3 6-month periods in a row. And because of that, we're now at this point of compliance and standard monitoring. With that, I'll take any questions on lead and copper.
real quick, just from a compliance standpoint, now that you've met the standards, what testing has to be done going forward?
The standard monitoring that we're now placed on requires 30 samples instead of 60, and it requires them during the warmest period of the year, because temperature affects lead and copper corrosion. That's why we stress always use cold water. So for 2018, we have to take 30 samples. I believe it's from May to...
3-month periods, May, June.
As I know, we had some issues with dealing with DEP with regard to the samples that we had taken, because when you rely on the homeowner to do it, they don't do it the way it's supposed to be done, and you have no control over it. So do you go back to the same homeowners you had before that actually did comply, or do you have to go through new ones?
We have to, the homes we go to are worst case homes. They're called Tier 1. So they're homes we know have lead service lines. There's 150 of them. So out of those 150, we have to get to 60. So we do go back to a lot of the same homes. Ones that have sampled improperly get removed from the pool. So that lessens the amount we have to get to 60. But we did have that case in the first 6-month round, and we were successful in having the state invalidate those results as a result of how the homeowner took them. And in most cases, that's the homeowner took it upon themselves to take it from a different fixture, or in one case, they took it from the bypass on their water softener. That's a point of stagnation where the water could have been sitting there for months, a year. So certainly there's going to be a larger concentration of contaminant there.
Yeah, Rich, the sample method you use 150 homes. Is that right? And that's the same sample you use every single year, that 150 homes?
Yes.
Isn't that a little bit unfair, considering that, we have, I don't know, 6,000 homes? And
The regulation requires that the samples be from these Tier 1 homes.
yeah,
So it has to be a home with a lead line service. If we're not successful in getting 60 out of that pool, we then move to what's called a Tier 2. Those then become multifamily dwellings that have lead service lines. If you don't get them out of that pool, there's a secondary tier. So we're forced in to that method by the regulations.
okay, all right, thank you.
And that's why we offer the testing. You could pick up a testing kit from our office. We've negotiated a $25 fee with a local lab. We don't get involved with the testing at all, but they do give us the results. So then in case there is an exceedance, we get in contact with the homeowner.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Calby, and thank you to everybody, all the employees who went out and got us these results, because it's very important. If somebody wanted to, maybe they don't know if they have a lead service line, but maybe they wanted to participate in this, could they reach out to the water department? How might they go about doing that?
They can call the phone number on the screen. They'll actually get a live person who might be able to look up their line right on that phone call. If not, they'll take the message and get back to them. On our website, there's lead and copper resources. All the information's on there, including where to contact to get those sample bottles. You could come into our office daily between 8:30 and 4:30 p.m. And also pick up a bottle for sampling.
And do you normally contact, if the home changes over and it's a Tier 1 home, do you usually contact the new residents and let them know that they could participate, or do they have to kind of figure it out?
We don't do that, but I believe part of the new ownership rule changes, they have to disclose to the new owner if they have lead services or piping or solder in their home that meets the criteria.
And is it 150 homes that have lead service lines throughout the whole system, or just in one town?
Throughout the whole system.
It's a small number of homes considering the size of the system.
On average, it's the older parts of each community where you'll find the homes that are over 100 years old. So,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
No comment.
Thank you.
So my questions, actually, most were answered. Why we went from 30 to 60 back to 30, that was because of the findings, then you were upped, so, and then we go back down. Okay, so
Yes.
that's good. How they're selected, that's fine. Did you say the polyorthophosphate was food grade?
Yes.
Okay, So you just want to explain to everyone what that means?
Well, it's a product that's also used in food manufacturing. It's found in many products that probably most of us use every day. Soda is an example. There's phosphates in soda. Other food grade products. I can't think of any other example. Milk, cheese, it's a preservative.
Okay.
So,
It's just a good,
Yep.
just a question because I...
well, it's a good one.
Okay.
Yep.
Plus, I just wanted to really say polyorthophosphate. Okay. And can this be made into the slide presentation, which is beautiful, thank you. Can this be made into like an MPEG or something so that it could go onto a website like Facebook posts and such so that people really have an opportunity that aren't here or aren't viewing from home? We can share this forward so everyone has the same information.
Certainly. We could put it up on our website. We could also include it as part of one of our daily Facebook posts.
Right.
You'll look here for the new results. Okay. But again, we'll include the precautions page because we want every consumer out there not to look at it as though this is over. You still should take precautions.
Right. Okay, great.
All right,
That's
thank
it.
you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Our next presentation is on the Carwell Field Treatment System design. Thank you, Mr. Bierboss, for being here. So, Mr. Calby, and are you having someone else come up?
Yes, I'm going to have Mike Mondellos from Arcadis. He's the consultant, professional engineer on the project. I invited him here tonight just in case there's any technical questions on the information I'm going to provide on this project. Okay. Let me move back. There we go. Oh, we're good. Thank you. Okay, so as you know, you've been considering, you introduced an ordinance for bond for treatment at the car treatment plant here in Ridgewood. I think maybe it was about a year ago, we discussed the beginning of that project, why it was necessary, the new rules that were forcing it. So tonight I want to summarize that and then also show you some renderings, some drawings of what this treatment's going to look like, answer any questions you have about it, because it's definitely groundbreaking. The only other place in our area that has this treatment is Fairlawn, and they did it as a demonstration project through the DEP probably about 5 years ago. 5 years ago, so. Arcadis was involved in that project. They found success in it as treatment for these contaminants. It's an approved treatment, and therefore one that we're proceeding with for this treatment plant. But let's just start with talking about the chemicals themselves. Chemicals we're looking to remove, and these are a lot harder to say than polyorthophosphate. PFOA, PFOS, and PFNA chemical names are perfluorooctanoic acid, which is PFOA. PFOS is perfluorosulfonic acid, and PFNA is perfluorooctanoic acid. These are common elements that you find in everything in those pictures right there. These chemicals are found in firefighting foam, pre-treated carpeting, clothing and textiles, dental floss, Teflon-coated cookware, fast food packaging, industrial floor wax and removers, stone tile and wood sealants, food contact paper, thread sealant tape, typically plumber's tape that you put around a pipe or fitting, and more. This chemical is in a lot of stuff. The chemical does not break down. It was recently discovered in the blood of polar bears in the East Greenland. So it travels. So that makes it very difficult to remove, makes it a contaminant concern. All three of these contaminants are surfactants. They're used in manufacturing, and they're used to break down and provide, lower the surface tension between liquids, between gas and a liquid, or between liquid and solid. Best example is carpet. Stain-resistant carpet will be treated with this so that if there's a spill, it doesn't penetrate into the carpet. If you're wearing rain gear, it's likely on that rain jacket. You notice how the water repels from your rain jacket, or if you use a type of treatment on your car windshield. The same idea. So they found that these chemicals that were manufactured for these purposes are harmful. So just in 2016, the EPA released a health advisory on these chemicals. They set the standard for the health advisory is 70 parts per trillion. Most of the contaminants we measure are at the part per billion level. This is the first contaminant that is the part per trillion level. The level set by the EPA was 70 parts per trillion for either PFOA or PFOS, or if, in combination, if you have both in the water, 70 is also the combined limit for those contaminants. Currently, the State Department of Environmental Protection is considering a new rule where New Jersey will have a standard of 15 parts per trillion. It'll be the lowest standard in the United States. They're currently in the rulemaking process for that. So here's a sample summary of the results at the car treatment facility and why it was taken out of service and why we're providing treatment. Prior to August of 2016, there were results that were garnered as part of the EPA's unregulated contaminant monitoring program that all utilities our size are required to test. We had tested those compounds as part of the EPA study. The EPA does those studies to determine if there are new contaminants out there that could possibly be harmful and are in the water. So in August of 2016, as a result of the EPA release of the advisory, we started testing more frequently than was required in accordance with the EPA unregulated monitoring schedule. And we found that we were getting very close to the number 70. And actually, in these samples that you're looking at, in some of the months, we didn't even have all 5 wells on at the car treatment plant because we shut down the wells out of the 5 that actually had the highest levels, and we were still creeping up to the 70. And you could see it in January 2017. We actually hit that limit. We could have continued to operate the system, but we erred on the side of caution and shut it down, pending design and installation of treatment. So how do we treat this? We use granulated activated carbon. This is no different than a tabletop filter you may have at home or what's in the filter in your refrigerator. It's carbon treatment that's in a vessel, although here, because we're treating 1,000 gallons per minute of water, the vessels are rather large. We're looking at 4 vessels holding 20,000 pounds worth of charcoal in them to filter out the water. Fortunately, the charcoal will last a year, but at that point it needs to be changed out with new charcoal to prevent the leaching of the contaminant. So most of you already know the car treatment plant is located here in Ridgewood, 207 Glen Avenue. It's directly behind the recycling center. That's where Ridgewood Water has its distribution division. One of the first buildings you see on that site when you pull into the driveway on the right-hand side is actually the car treatment facility. The building to the left is our distribution center, and then further to the left as you go in and on the right is the recycling center, and of course our fire department to the left. I'm going to just go through these next few slides a little bit quick. I know they're very hard to see, but this is just an overview of that site. Again, the distribution building on the left, the car treatment plant on the upper right, and to the upper left is a storage garage that we utilize for our equipment and materials. Here is a proposed view of the treatment. So you could see our overview, plan view of the 4 vessels and where they'll now sit on the site in comparison to the rest of the buildings on the location. Now this gets a little bit detailed, but this is the mechanical view of the equipment. The 4 vessels and all the piping that will be run to allow the water to come out of the car plant and into these vessels and then back out into the system. But to give you a real idea, this is what it looks like today, and this is what it will look like when the system's installed. Now, it's going to be a big change to this site. These vessels are 25 feet in height. They're elevated because this whole site is in a floodplain. The building to the right has a height of 30 feet. So coming into the site, the building is higher. Our predominant concern is the properties to the rear. The trees that you're seeing in the picture are not there today. We were going to be planting trees along the back property line at about 12-foot height, and then they grow at about a foot so a year, Michael? 2 feet a year to prevent the view from those homeowners in the rear. I'll go back to this slide and just show you another perspective. Just gives you an idea of what it looks like from another angle, the piping. So essentially how this works, the building in the foreground is the pump station. The water pumps out of 5 wells located throughout the car facility. Those 5 wells co-join in that building, where they then run through a series of treatment, which includes a standing aeration tower to remove volatile organic compounds. The water will then come out of the building and into these 4 filtration units, get chlorinated, and then out into the system free of these chemicals. I'll go back to that. So with that, we're happy to entertain any questions. Our next steps are to go to the state for approvals. We'll have to come here for a courtesy review to the Village Planning Board.
Can you just go back to the site plan? Are you showing, where is the generator on this?
Okay, the generator would be in the lower right in front of the building that's U-shaped. So the view you're looking at here, Glen Avenue is to the lower right of the drawing.
No, I understand. So when we come into, when we come in, we're seeing the generator is going to be the first thing we see.
You're going to see it on the left-hand side,
Right.
yes.
Okay.
Then to the right, you will catch a corner view of these new vessels that are on the side of the building.
And just again, how tall is the generator? With that, because I know we talked about it, it's on that block.
Could you turn on your microphone, please, so we can hear you?
About 15 feet, if I'm remembering correctly.
That was 15 feet with the block?
Correct.
And then what were the dimensions on that generator?
I think it was 20 foot long by about 8 feet wide.
So 20 feet by 8 feet
And the
by
generator
15.
itself will be 9 feet tall, and then the whole thing is elevated about 4 or 5 feet, so get 14, 15 feet tall. And that's, if it helps, it's probably just straight up from the word site and site plan, if that helps locate the generator.
All right, you want to give questions first?
So help me understand, Rich. Our requirement is 15 parts per trillion. Nationally, it's 70 parts per trillion. Is that correct?
Yes.
How does the state compare as it relates to PFOA and PFOS? As just do we have more of it in our state than any other state, or do you know?
I don't know the answer to that question. And the 15 is still a rule in the making. It's not official at this point. Whether they're going to go with that number or they may change it, and when they're going to enact it. But I don't know as far as New Jersey compared to other states. Actually toured a plant in New York that has this very same problem in Newburgh. They're adjacent to Newburgh Airport. As a result of firefighting on that airport over all the years, the contaminant leached into the surface water body that they draw their water from. I think predominantly in New Jersey, it's being found in the groundwater.
Yeah. And I certainly don't mean to alarm people, but having this in your system over a longer period of time and at high levels, what are the results? I mean, is this cancerous?
Cancer causing, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why the state's considering a stringent standard, on the basis of how they look at contaminants, all contaminants.
Okay. What is this costing us?
The bond, I believe, is $3.4 million.
Okay, just for this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we need multiples of these per well area, or how's that going to work?
Well, we are currently testing all the other locations.
Yeah.
All the other locations are below the 70 parts per trillion. But we are going to start testing to see if we be in adherence with the new regulation that the state is coming out with.
Okay, so we're unsure right now as to whether we need more of these or not. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
You know, if it's here,
Yeah.
and the standard's going to be lowered to 15,
Yeah.
I would say we're probably going to be looking at this a lot of other locations.
And do you have any feeling for what this is going to cost?
Well, I mean,
if we have to do multiple sites.
you got to put in scale. So
Yeah.
this location here puts out 1,000 gallons per minute. We have 26 active points of entry. They don't all put out that volume of water.
Yeah.
Some may put out 300, 500. So economy of scale, they would be sizably different.
Yep.
But when you add it all together, if you had to do it everywhere, you're looking at multi-millions of dollars.
And we obviously haven't put this into the capital budget yet, is that, or any kind of capital appropriation? Yeah, got it. Okay. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Is this going to be, do you have a timetable for when this is going to be completed and back online?
We're currently shooting for it's either the last part of this year or the first quarter of 2019. We're originally looking to get it online the end of this year, but we ran into some issues. We have to have a sanitary discharge line coming out of the site for backwashing. You know, we have to get the permits, and so that timing is going to put us off.
Okay, thank you.
So at this time, what is the action that we're taking prior to this being installed? So what is the action, and what is the action that we're going to be relaying to residents?
The action currently is to adhere to the EPA advisory 70 parts per trillion, and if anything's over that, to take it out of service and provide treatment. This was the only facility that had anything near that amount. So it was the first one that we took out and went after treatment. You know, we've provided information on our website from the very beginning about this. We've done at least, it's been a topic in at least 2 of our forums already that we've done with the public, you know, about the contaminant and what we're doing to treat it.
And you said there were 5, what are the 5 wells that go into this?
There are 5 wells scattered and on the Carr property. They're all Carr wells.
They're all Carr wells, okay.
So they currently all go to that treatment building where combined they're treated and then put out into the distribution system.
Okay. And then, so making the assumption the facility is upgraded and you do everything that is proposed, then how do you compare that to the rest of the facilities throughout town? Like, because I would guess that there is going to be a population that's going to say, you know, our water's better than your water because we have this facility, or we have this treatment.
It's no different than treatment we have throughout the whole system. There's certain locations that have air strippers because it's volatile organic compounds, and others that have nothing because they haven't hit those limits. But you know, at the end of the day, the water that gets out of here, yes, it goes to Ridgewood first, but it's then mixing with waters from multiple other wells. In the summer, purchased water is flowing throughout the system as well to make up for any deficit, you know, for lawn watering and those peak usages. So there's a lot of mixing that occurs. Actually, one of the alternatives that the state offers is to mix the water, whereby you could provide a percentage more of surface water, thereby diluting the contaminant.
Yeah.
You know, whether or not perception-wise that's acceptable, you know, I don't know, but we don't have the ability to do that.
Okay.
You know, there's limitations on how much we could purchase from Suez, and the points that we take are very far away from this location.
And do they, like our competitors, because they are a competitor, do they have facilities like this? Are you aware of any facilities that they have?
You know, the biggest competitors are the private companies, and the majority of them are surface water fed, so they don't have this issue currently. They will in the future, because the majority of the water that's drank by our customers eventually goes out into the sewer and treated and goes downstream to a plant that then treats it for potable water purposes. But all the groundwater systems around us are going to have the same issue. Just
And
where,
they'll have a system similar to this installed.
or they're going to result to purchasing all their water, which, in some cases they could do that because they're a lot smaller. But us having the 4 communities to serve, we don't have that leverage. We are looking into a possible other source to purchase, possibly Passaic Valley Water Commission, which will help. But with this being one of our largest yielding wells, that's why we felt it was beneficial to make the investment. If it was a 300 gallon per minute well field, then we would think second guess it and do that analysis. I think in this case when we proposed the bond, I forgot the numbers, but we showed what it would cost to replace this with purchased water, and the payback was I think a couple of years on that basis. So we're certainly going to focus on the largest yielding locations first.
That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilman Hache?
So, Rich, it seems like what this is it's a solution once we have identified a problem. So obviously the readings of this particular well were elevated enough that they caused some concern. But a $3.4 million solution, it's not cheap. If you look at it from a supply chain standpoint, is there anything that we can do to sort of get ahead of it so that we're not treating contaminated water? Can we sort of stem the flow of whatever is making that water contaminated? Would that be a cheaper solution, or is that even available?
Well, I mean, stemming the contamination, it's a comment I've made to the state. They've done it before with other contaminants. They go after the sources and they create a spill fund, which then is an opportunity for us to get grant money to build the treatment. But the best thing we can do is try to lower our consumption. And we've already done that here in the village. It's just now a matter of having that done throughout, our entire system. We stayed through stage 2 water restrictions all last year, but ultimately, our goal is to get people to use less water outside, thereby lessening the need for the amount of water and the amount that needs to be treated. That will give us more leverage in terms of how much needs to be provided with new treatment.
When you talk about grant money, I mean, what's sort of the size of the grants that you've seen from this?
None for this yet, okay. But the best example, again, going back to volatile organic compounds, in most cases the state will pay for 75% of the treatment costs. If a system had to put up a tower, stripping tower, and the state had that knowledge of where it came from, and they collected money from that, body or group that caused that contamination. Right now the state's even doing a study in our area relative to VOCs, but no one's undertaken a study of this yet, as far as I know. What they should. They make the rules, but then they don't give you the money to take care of it.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I just have one follow-up question. So you were talking about consumption and lowering consumption. So we have 4 proposed developments coming into Ridgewood. So where are they? What wells are they drawing from, and what's going to be the challenge then?
The unfortunate part to that is the state calculates capacity in terms of what's available for development. It's a paper calculation where they look at the worst month in 5 years, and they calculate the peak daily from that and then compare it to what your capacity is. Currently, right now, on paper, Ridgewood has a surplus. It's not large, but large enough that these developments would likely get a permit. But that has to be evaluated by the state. Each developer has to go and get a permit. But to your point, it's added consumption demand on the system. In most cases, there's already demand that were at these sites for the uses, but I think in each case it's an increase, based on the amount of dwellings that are going in. But what our leverage is there, I think it's not much, but your point is definitely an important one.
Does the state ever dictate any type of occupancy requirements?
No, it's strictly a demand calculation based on the number of units. So And it only kicks in if they have 50 realty units or more. Anything below that doesn't have to get a state permit for the connection.
Wait, what was that number? Say that again?
50.
50.
It's 50 realty units. Yep. Yeah.
Just to be a little clarification on that. What you're saying is that that is only on paper. It's a paper number, but then there's a real number. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, the paper number is looking at 1 day in 5 years.
Right.
But in reality, in a summer, we're operating through a fluctuation, like a roller coaster of days, where it could be maybe a 12 one day, 17, 15, then we get a 16. So at those points in time, and that's why we're going to water restrictions, the system can no longer keep up.
So I guess to that question, and going a little bit off topic here, do we weigh in with the state when they have this paper number? Do we supplement that report by stating that historically we've had these deficits and that is an absolute adverse impact to the system?
I've never done that, but I'm sure you can.
And we should, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
I think that would have more strength definitely coming from, the governing body. I've never done that in my experience, but, I believe the states would be open to anything, but they have a process. The process is this formulation and certification that gets done.
okay, so that we'll follow up on that. So just going back one more second, can we go back to the visual of the house before the tanks and then after the tanks?
That's the before.
Okay. Does this go before planning board?
A courtesy review, yes.
Okay. And do we notice the residents?
I
Is
don't
that a
know
requi-
if
do we
notices,
notice
I don't think
on a
notices are
200
required.
Notice is not required, but
I think we should
You can make a recommendation.
Yeah, I think we should at least notify residents within a proximity that might have a visual impact, because it appears to me, and I can't really see from this photo, but it does appear to me, you wouldn't just want to wake up one day
Oh, sure.
and see this in your
Yeah.
backyard. So, and it appears to me that other homes on the opposite side of the street may also have from that perspective, an impact, a visual impact. So I think we should, as a rule, extend that courtesy. Okay, any other questions?
Yeah, just one more, Rich. The reason we're identifying this in our system is, first of all, we haven't looked for it before, number one. Is that right?
I'm sorry, we haven't looked for it before?
Yeah. I mean, this is relatively new, so this could have been around for 20 years and we just didn't know it existed. Okay. The other thing is, are we finding more of this because we have to drill deeper to get the water, or is it just appearing in the water table as is?
I believe it's just appearing in the water table as is.
Okay. All right, good. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So our first discussion item is for Ridgewood Water. It's awarding a sole source contract for furnishing a corrosion inhibitor. As Mr. Kelby discussed, the lead and copper rule requires us to implement a corrosion control program. The phosphate inhibitors are added to the water, and then they create a thin coating on the inside of the plumbing materials, effectively preventing the corrosion of lead and copper into the water. In 2013, we implemented a pilot program utilizing polyorthophosphate to control the corrosion. Based on the pilot program's success, Ridgewood Water installed the inhibitor at all the active treatment facilities. This was completed in April 2016. ESC Environmental uses a unique blend that is developed and distributed solely through their company. They utilize a consistent formula via the same blend, and it's important for us to continue to use it to maintain the corrosion control. Therefore, Mr. Calvi is recommending the sole source contract award to ESC Environmental out of Glenville, New York, in the amount of $170,000 for the year 2018. Bulk delivery is $10.49 a gallon, 55-gallon drum, $10.98 a gallon, and shipping is $60 per week. It's up about 51 cents per gallon from last year for the bulk delivery, and about $1 for the 55-gallon drum. So,
Questions? Okay, moving on.
okay, the next one is for the survey of the Elks Club. As you know, we're in the process of acquiring the parcel property where the Ridgewood Elks Club currently stands. Part of the process is to obtain an accurate current survey of the site. We have a village surveyor, Daniel Dunn. He has given us a quote for the necessary work, including an ACAD file for design purposes, and that's $2,220. It will include the setting of the property corners, and also it'll give the topography as well. And that's important, obviously, because it's close to the Hohokus Brook.
Questions, comments? Moving on.
Okay, our first item under parking is for the parking enforcement from July 1st to December 31st, 2017. I'm going to have Sergeant J. Chuck come up. Captain Lyons, are you going to come up as well? Okay. So basically, you had this presentation earlier, probably mid-year in 2017 for January through June. So this is the second half of the year. Basically, you've been provided with graphs, which we're going to try to get on these monitors. But 3 graphs show the top violations in the top 15 locations and an hourly graph of when they were issued. Top 4 violations are relating to parking meter use. They include expired meter, repeat parking, time limit restrictions, and CBD employee zone violations. I'm going to have Sergeant Chuck and Captain Lyons take it from here and walk you through their report.
Yes, so real quick, you guys asked us to...
Do you just want to open up, I think we want you to open up the files that
You
you're...
asked me to do a lot of things
Okay,
at the same time.
And maybe make it full screen so everybody can see it.
Does anyone know what that says?
It says top violation code, July, okay, there you go.
I'm sorry, we can skip that one, go to the next one. If I can't Google it, I can't do it.
There you go.
Okay, so as you guys are aware, last year we started getting into the 90s by getting an e-ticket for the parking enforcement, which has given us great capabilities of seeing trends. As you guys can see here, this is a pie graph of the top violations written by parking enforcement for the second half of the year. And as we discussed, the number 1 violation, of course, was expired meter use. Followed far behind was repeat parking. The time limit, which is the 3rd highest, that is going to be slightly skewed because that is also a citation that we write on street level. That's for 2-hour parking and stuff like that. So, but we do write meter violations on the time length, which we found that employees like to take advantage of broken meters. So after that 3-hour time limit, they're still not allowed to stay there. So that violation correlates with meter use a little bit. The surprising one was the CBD employee zone violation and how large it was. We found that Saturdays is about 80% of that violation. And what happens is people are just parking, not really paying attention, and they're just using the space because they find it. That brings us back to one of the most important things that we always ask ourselves is when we do these surveys, what can the village do to make these numbers go down? Our goal ultimately is to have no violations.
So are there things that we can help direct people with better signage, or are there just personal habits that we're having problems with? So why we did that, we did address some signage issues that we're working on with Signal to help folks. So we're putting up some extra of the Park Mobile signs, so as people find a parking space, they're going to easily understand that they're in a certain zone, and that when they pay for that zone on Park Mobile, that they're paying for the zone that they're parking in. Because what we're seeing is sometimes people, they're parking on East Ridgewood Ave, turning around and paying for the wrong zone because they're so close to another area. Does that make sense?
Can I just jump in there, because I
Sure.
have one question. So, just for clarification, in repeat parking, what you're saying is that if I park in Zone A, and then I move my car and remain in Zone A, that's a ticketable offense. Is that a violation?
No, so the way repeat parking has been defined and how we enforce it is per meter. So it means if you're in meter 14 all day, past the 3-hour limit, then and you pay twice, then you're repeat parking.
But if I move from that meter to meter 28, then it's in the
a-
same zone, it starts all over.
That does.
Good. Okay, great, thank you.
So if we go to a kiosk system, then how do we enforce then?
So the kiosk is attached to Chestnut Street lot, which has no meters at all. So for that zone and that zone only, it is a zone issue. So you can't park in that whole zone for the 3 hours.
So how does it work then if you put the kiosk on the street and instead of going to the old meters, how would that be enforced?
So that's something that we've been talking to Mr. Rooney about and moving forward, and Signal. There are things where we might have to start figuring out, is it the spot that we're renting, or is it the zone that we're renting? Yes.
All right, so just one more time, I was making a note and I just wanted to make sure I had that. So in the kiosk lot, if I pay Park Mobile in the kiosk and I'm in spot number 1, and then at 4 p.m. or at 3 o'clock I move my car and I'm still in that kiosk zone and I move to 8, I get a ticket for repeat parking.
In that lot only. Because the definition is contingent, it goes with the meter heads. When the ordinance was written, it was written about meter heads. And since we don't have meter heads in that zone at all anymore, the kiosk is the meter head, so you're paying for that zone use.
Just one zone, one meter.
So just okay, questions beget questions, but I guess my question now is whether or not we actually understood that when we did that would be a...
So that was the policy before.
I'm sorry?
That was how we were enforcing before the kiosk.
Right.
As long as the meters stay on the street level, we would continue to go with the meters. So if we did have 12 kiosks throughout town, and you decided to pay for East Ridgewood Ave on the kiosk, the officers would know that you parked at meter 14, and then you moved down the street later, and you started a new spot, but in the same zone.
Okay.
If we started eliminating the meter heads, it would become a little more difficult.
Because my understanding was when you have a kiosk, so essentially you have different numbered stalls. If you make it specific to the number stall, again, people are pretty smart when they want to be. They game the system by coordinating, and okay, I'll move out of spot number 2, you pull into mine, and I pull into yours. And that's,
That is why a lot of people switch to the zone.
right.
Is your microphone on? If not, if so, speak into it.
Here we go. A lot of people intentionally do that, so what happens is you pick the zone for that reason, so now people cannot park on East Ridgewood Avenue between Cottage and Maple. You'd have to move up 2 blocks wherever we designate the zone to be different. But that's a ordinance change.
Okay.
Any more questions about the individual violations?
Yeah, Jay, the violations, if you were to kind of break them out by percentage, say the blocks closest to the train station, on the east side of the train station, you're looking at Broad, Chestnut, and Oak, I guess, yeah, Oak Street. And then if you went east of that, where do they break out as far as the violations? Is it like 80% occur in that area versus 20% in the other area? Help me understand that.
So we actually have a violation by location
Yeah.
map for you. If you wanted me to break it down into larger groups like that, we certainly could.
Yeah, that would be helpful, because I'm guessing that the blocks closest to the train station probably are the worst offenders, and that's probably the area we want to clear out as quickly as possible.
Yeah, we certainly
Yeah.
can do that for you, and
Yeah.
I'll get that back to you.
Yeah, okay.
Our old walking posts were zones 1, 2, and 3,
Yeah.
which is pretty close to what you're describing, so we may break it down like that.
Oh, good, that'd be helpful, thank you.
Supposed to.
According to your map, or your chart, isn't it cottage lot that has the most, unless I'm misreading it? Isn't that the one that has the greatest number of violations?
Yes.
Okay, so it's not confined to the area closest to the train station?
No, so the Cottage Street lot and East Ridgewood, obviously East Ridgewood Ave and Cottage Street lot are very close, they're almost identical. They have the two largest amount of violations in the CBD.
Unless, of course, you added all of those, that area up, then you would have a different picture, but to Jeff's point, okay, got it. All right, moving, okay. Questions?
Well, I guess, looking at the graph and listening to the conversation, and you don't have to be a rocket scientist to realize the overtime parking is at two specific times, right after lunch, and people are probably staying long for their lunch at 1:30, right? And then 4 o'clock, which is probably either people coming into town after picking up kids from school and, thinking they're only going to be there for 15 minutes or a half hour, throwing a couple of quarters in. And, but I mean, the overtime parking is the lion's share when you look at this graph here. And
Yeah, I'm sorry, you're talking about this pie graph. Yeah, yeah, overtime parking. And obviously, you have 1,400 opportunities to...
yeah, I mean, I guess, how do you fix that? You just pay your meter.
I kind of think with overtime parking, that's choice and error.
Yeah, I mean, it's clear.
Yeah.
It's clear that that's it, and it's...
But I actually, when I'm looking at this, it's interesting because, you could kind of delve into this and keep, dissecting in a lot of different ways. When I see overtime parking, I look at it and I think, well, was somebody like 30 seconds, they were running back to their car, or were they just blatantly just said, you know what, I'm not paying this, and if I get caught, I get caught. Is it that? What is that? And then I guess the other question is, when we look at these violations and we're seeing them in this chart, we see there are a lot, but if you were to break this out, how many a day, it's not really as maybe dramatic as this picture looks, no?
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, so if you look right day-to-day violations, we're looking at it, in this period of time, but if you look at it in a different way, it has a different story.
I was thinking for our purposes of enforcement and ordinances and everything, it seems like there's almost nothing you could do for overtime parking. Someone's either going to pay and leave early or leave on time, or they're going to stay and get a ticket. With the CBD employee violations, that you can do with signage, and like we just reduced some of the employee spots in Cottage because maybe they weren't being filled, so that gives them back to regular parkers. But I mean, it seems like it's almost 70% of the violations are over time, and the times are clearly posted right there on the meters when you're looking at them. So I mean, I don't know what else you could do to fix that.
Yeah, you're right. As far as the CBD employee parking, since the reduction of the unused space, especially during the work week, we've seen that it's 90% full every day. So that definitely has worked. And also the Walnut Street is about 90% full every day. However, Saturdays is a different animal. There's a lot more turnover, a lot more short employees and short visitors. So as people are looking for spots, I think they're just running into a spot that they find.
Just let me ask another question. So on the 15% of the overtime meter violations were progressive penalty violators. They're repeat offenders, right? Is that what they are? And then we have the other 40% progressive penalty violators on the repeat parking. So we tier those fees now, those fines, those violations, right? So they're increasing. Can you just give us an overview of how that happens?
Sure, so,
Because that's actually a big chunk of, no, that's a lot of people on a regular basis, right?
So for overtime meter, your first violation to your fifth violation is tier 1. Your 6th through 10th is tier 2. Your 11th through 20th is tier 3, and your 21st overtime meter and above is
Can you give us
tier
the
4.
amounts, the penalties for
Right.
each individually? Like, give it 1 to 6 is what?
1 to 5 is $25, $50 for your 6th through 10th, 75 through your 11th through 20th, and $100 above. I don't think anyone had made that top tier this year.
No, nobody's in the $100 club.
No, thank God. As far as repeat parking, it's a first offense is $25, and then your 2nd through 5th offense is $50. Your 6th through 10th offense is $75, and your 11th and up is $100. So
Then on the repeat parking, because that's, if I'm looking at the line, and the CBD employee, now, what percentage, are we able to isolate the CBD employees that are repeat parking? Can we get that, extract that to that level of specificity?
we could be able to find out the CBD employees who have paid for the use of the CBD area and see if they have see if they're violating the repeat parking. But as far as the other employees that haven't paid into that, not really.
Okay.
But remember that the CBD employee permit allows them to park there for 8 hours. So it would be less likely, I would think, that the CBD employees would be repeat parking.
Yeah, because it'd be used.
Because they can park there for the entire 8 hours from 10 to 6.
Right.
So there shouldn't be a lot of repeat parking for CBD employees. There might be the overtime meter violations because they may park not in CBD spaces.
Okay.
And therefore, they would just let it stop at 3 hours, and at that time, they'll only get the overtime meter violation, correct?
Okay, got
So
it.
if they don't pay again, they just get the overtime violation.
Exactly. So what we do see is they get a couple of repeat parking tickets, and then they go to not paying the meter, and then they'll get a couple of meter tickets, and then when that gets too expensive, they'll go back. So you kind of have this flip-flop of how they choose to try to avoid paying.
Until you make it so painful, they absolutely make that determination it's not in their best interest. Yeah. Okay.
I just wanted to point out too, I think the most summonses being issued between 1 and 6 is, telling that, and closer to the dinner hour is when they tend to be issued.
Yes, so we do have one more slide, which was a line graph of the timing of when summonses are issued, and we were actually a little surprised that it was so skewed over to the right. Everything is after lunch into the dinner hour, and then obviously as 6 o'clock comes, the meters aren't in effect anymore, so you see a heavy drop-off, but the summonses after that time are all safety violations, people parking in yellow zones, double parking, stuff like that, because we do have enforcement out till 8 or 9 o'clock every night.
I just have curiosity, is it when ticketing I actually went over to the cupcake shop, it's Mike's birthday this past Sunday, and I realized how dark it was. Does that
It's
impact?
the line graph one.
Yeah, the line graph, yeah.
Yeah, that one.
So does the daylight that it's dark now impact, or at 6 o'clock tonight, or at 5 o'clock it's dark out? Does that impact the tickets that are issued? Because our POs are not necessarily able to see that?
No,
Okay, all right. Any other questions? No? Okay, thank
Okay,
you.
so thank you for the presentation, I appreciate it. Sergeant Chuck, you might just want to stay for the public valet. I'm going to have Mr. Rooney come up, the Director of the Parking Utility, and our CFO. So, as you know, we had a public valet at the area near Memorial Park at Van Ness Square along the center island. It ran from October 27th through December 30th. We found that, interestingly, and quite, I expected it, that our heaviest times were near the holidays. Going into the holiday season, December 2nd, December 8th was our very largest, and then also on December 16th, perhaps indicative of holiday shopping or holiday gatherings or, parties perhaps. So we realized a revenue total of $1,335. We parked a total of 267 vehicles during those times, and so we were a loss of $22,996. So this is up for discussion. Mr. Rooney's here if there are questions, if there are logistical questions. I know Sergeant Chuck was instrumental in, helping us to set it up and dealing with the parking company. So,
Questions?
Thank you. So what did we learn, and can it be improved upon?
He can start.
We had competition from 2 other vendors providing services.
let me just have you speak up a little bit.
Sorry.
Thanks.
I said we had competition with 2 other restaurants providing services, so that probably impacted the usage. So I don't know how we modify that or bring that into line, but certainly there were, this wasn't the only show in town.
Yeah.
As far as logistically improvements?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I called my dad once when I was a young man. I said, "Hey, Dad, I got ants in the house." And he said, "Put the bait by the ants, and the ants will come to the bait." So I kind of think that valet structure should be similar. We want to get close to where the people are, and they don't have to be right on top of the restaurants, but if we're getting them in the right areas, they're going to use it.
So does that mean that we would have it necessarily closer to the train station? Is that your thinking?
No, I'm not thinking that, but I'm thinking we need to figure out what the best corners or locations are.
Okay.
And for everyone to say, this is going to be easy to get to my restaurant. This is going to be easy to use on a Saturday, to spend the day up in town, and we'll park it once and we'll enjoy the day. I think there's improvements there.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And I visited the Central Valley almost every Saturday night. And what I see is that because we don't meter till 6 o'clock, if we were metering, let's say to 8 o'clock, there might have been more of a demand possibly for a valet. I noticed, sometimes I was later, I noticed from the valet reports that usually after about 11 o'clock, there wasn't much activity. And if there was, it wasn't through the valet. People could find free parking at that time of night. They were usually busy after, probably around, 7, 8, 9, in that area. And then it kind of dwindled after that. So I would have thought, personally, possibly people would have been coming in, after dinner to go to some of the local places for drinks or, whatever. But it just really didn't occur. So those are just my observations from going there, speaking to the people who were doing the valet parking. We also had a couple of weather events which prevented it from being opened. And some nights when we had very, very bitter cold temperatures, and I think people just didn't venture out from their homes, So those are my observations.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Walsh?
So I would say that my observation was that we didn't have the participation from the chamber and from the other establishments, because if we had had more of a partnership, and I think that you really, Councilman Hache really tried to light the match under them to get that partnership going. I think that was the biggest challenge, because we were kind of on our own, hoping that people were going to use the valet, and the restaurants that had their own valet, they're servicing their restaurant only. You said my restaurant. It was my restaurant. Mm-hmm. Well, it's our village, and we were hoping that all of the restaurants were going to kind of pitch in and work with us. And I think that was the big, fail in this exercise, that we didn't have that. So, I don't know if that would be a possibility for us. I know that you work with them on a regular basis, but I don't know if we would be the ones, we put in all the money for the CBD. So, we're the ones that truly lost, but I think everybody lost in that it wasn't successful for a couple of other reasons. So, my opinion.
And could I just say one thing? We did set up a portal because there was interest in validation by the restaurants, and so that their customers would get validated for, and not have to pay the parking fee themselves. And we didn't have any participation, unfortunately. So.
Yeah, I agree with Councilman Walsh. I mean, that's what I was going to say too. There was zero buy-in from any of the businesses downtown, so we set it up and put it down there. We said, here it is, and nobody else said, here it is with us. So I just wanted to say I agree with that. That it's unfortunate.
Another demographic that I don't think we've talked about, and I don't think it's a popular demographic for valet, was the employees. You tend to have 400 to 600 employees uptown at night.
Well, I guess that if you were doing that, in all likelihood, you'd have to be valet your employees at 4 p.m. as opposed to 6, because they're already on shift. So they have to be there setting up for their dinner crowd. But
Yeah, I think a lot of valuable lessons learned. And if you look at it in other areas where it's worked, it was terrible the first time around. Red Bank was one of them. Red Bank has a different downtown than we have because it's more of a box. So you can find the little corners where you have, better visibility, let's say. Our problem is we're strip, like Montclair, but we're very short strip. A lot of lessons learned. I think, the participation was the most disappointing, because when you talk to any of the other establishments, particularly restaurants, the complaint always was that there were a handful of restaurants in town who had a competitive edge by being able to provide valet parking for their customers. And the complaints, I'm sure you've heard them, why does this one get, 4 parking spaces and the other one gets 7? And we're all suffering, and so here we are saying, okay, fine, we'll level the playing field. It was a pilot, so we weren't going to disrupt the parking programs that those restaurants had already that were active, because it was a pilot program. But this was also done in the anticipation that the venues where these restaurants are parking today, the lots that they're using, are going to be closed as we go into construction phase for the 4 multifamily housing projects. So, anticipating what would happen in that event, what those restaurants are using today for parking won't exist. But the frustrating part was, okay, so here it is. We're going to level the playing field. You can park here. All you have to do is just order these stickers, and you'll be able to validate parking for your customers. And that no one jumped on board and participated. Because it's saying, well, it's a problem if that guy's doing it and I don't get to do it, but now that I get to do it, well, he's still doing it. I'm not jumping in. That's part of it. I think on the signage part, there was some confusion in the beginning. People thought it was a private event. I think someone asked, hey, is this for a wedding or something? Because the sign said valet parking, but didn't say public or municipal valet parking. I think that's one of the things that we can do. The visibility of the signs, I think, could have been a little bit better. The illumination. Our downtown's not particularly well lit. But again, it gets back to having it's different points of coordination. One is the push or the desire from the restaurants to participate. That's one, and to participate you have to promote it. And second is just that awareness. And what we're hoping for, and again, it was never meant to be a parking solution. It was really meant to be something that's a sort of a concierge experience, bring people into downtown and increase foot traffic. Because if you have to walk from a short distance from your car to a restaurant, you might, on the way, pass a couple of shops or, stores that you might be interested in coming back to, so.
So in as much as I see it as a concierge, I also see it as somewhat of a parking solution. I saw it twofold because we were looking to relocate cars out of that more intensely used immediate area of the restaurants and shift that over to the spaces that we were able to pick up from the Board of Ed. One of the restaurant owners said to me, well, I'm not going to participate in this because if I have a meal ticket, a couple comes in, they have dinner, maybe that's $25 because the cost of their particular food is not necessarily upscale and more expensive. And then taking a $5 hit was too much, too significant. But if you really think about it, the number of patrons on any given night that may have used this, you can't just base it on one ticket. You have to base it on your entire night's transactions. So to take that tact is a little unfortunate and misrepresents because you really do have to take your entire night worth of tickets and then calculate how much that valet would have cost you because, in fact, it may have been a significant benefit at the end of that. I actually think it's worth rethinking and revisiting. I don't know about anyone else, but I think if we looked at this and before going down this path again, find restaurants and stores, maybe shift the hours to it a little bit differently, tweak the hours, and go to the businesses and the restaurants and get their buy-in first. Maybe there's a way to go to the Chamber of Commerce, maybe there's a way to go to them and say, if we're going to do this, we need to know that you're part of this with us and we're not just, doing everything without being a partner.
Yeah, because, there's scalability in this. It costs, on average, a restaurant who's running their own valet program costs anywhere between $50,000 to $60,000 a year.
Right.
Because you have to pay for the lots and you have to pay for the valet service. So really, at the end of the day, and you're having 3 or 4 restaurants that are eating that cost today, independently. And you would think that we're talking about 3 restaurants out of the 70-something that we have in the downtown. So certainly it could have been scaled, and you have the benefit of having valet, but only to the extent that you're paying for what people are using. And I'll use Roots as an example. They're paying for that valet in that lot, whether one person shows up for dinner or 200 people show up. They're paying for it no matter what. I think the beauty of this would have been the scalability and also just allowing the restaurants to pay for the usage for the particular customers. If they have 5 customers, they would have paid for 5 or 10 and so on. So I think it can be reworked, but, I think we need to get a commitment from the businesses that they're going to be, doing this going forward. Because the original plan was, if you recall, that we were going to open it up for companies to come in and operate a valet system on their own, but nobody was willing to take that risk because valet companies say, "No, we valet cars. We don't make money off parking cars. We just get paid for the service." So.
Yeah, and the one thing I will say is, and because I was down at the valet many nights actually with Heather, when there were times when I saw families get out of their car, they were being valeted because they had a stroller, they had children, they had a whole crew. But mostly what I observed is that in the immediate vicinity and throughout the village, there were certainly ample free parking spaces. So the question that begs to be asked is, why would I valet my car for $5 or even for free? When I go out, if the hospital valet parks your car for free, but I park my car because there's a space, I park it. Why park your car? Why have anyone move your car for free or for a fee if 30 feet away, 40 feet away, 50 feet away, there's ample parking. And that was my observation every single night I went down there. There were ample parking spaces. So I think that's something else that maybe we should be looking at, is that what the real usage is. We could have just been off time. Okay.
The only other recommendation I would make is if we try it again, perhaps we would consider, it was always Saturday night that was the heavier night, so possibly just doing it all day Saturday, maybe from noon to 11 or something, because there actually were some businesses in town who said that they would be interested in validating for their customers. So, and honestly, anyone who's been in the CBD in Ridgewood on a Saturday, it's crazy. So, I mean, it's busy, it's great, it's vibrant, but it's very hard sometimes to find a parking space. And so, for the convenience of being able to go, perhaps see a movie, have lunch, and then do some shopping, it might be viable. It's just something for the council to consider if and when we decide to do this again.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is the overview of the Walker Report on Hudson Street Parking Garage Financial Feasibility Study and Allocation Study. This has actually been removed from the agenda this evening due to inaccuracies in their assumptions. They're going to revise it for us, and we'll discuss this further on February 28th at our work session on that date. We also are going to try to have representatives from Walker be here that evening, so that any questions the council may have about their studies can be answered. So the next one is the overview of responses to the Hudson Street Parking Garage RFP. I'll have Mr. Rooney stay, and I'll have Mr. Ruthershauser, our village engineer, come up as well. Mr. Ruthershauser has prepared a overview. Basically, I'll just summarize that on January 19th, we received 4 proposals. There were 23 registered plan holders, with 6 of those parties being data firms who do it for bidding, basically a way of advertising. The 4 we received were from Pike Development, Prismatic Development, Terminal Construction, and Epic Management. We're basically just going to do an overview this evening. The council is going to set another meeting date simply for the purpose of interviewing the firms which you wish to interview, whether it's 3 or 4, that's your decision. But it'll be one night, and they'll be back to back. And this was similar to what was done previously with the former parking garage. And it's a way for you to be able to get to know the principals and ask them questions directly. So tonight is basically an overview and summary. So Mr. Ruthershauser, I'll turn it over to you.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. As Heather said, we got 4 responses to our RFP. Myself and Bob Rooney and others have read through them. I prepared a memo detailing some observations. I could say right now at this point, none of the 4 responses that we got are perfect. They all have little flubs, little flaws, little items that need clarification. The prices that they quoted range from $9,464,666 to a high of $14,399,000 even. Those are large sums, and I think, as Heather said, the village should take a very deliberative path in deciding which of these 4 vendors we would like to go with. I'd like to offer the council the opportunity to ask any questions if you had a chance to read through my review memo, or if you had any questions on the actual proposals that I think were forwarded over to you.
Can we first just take that mouse and kind of maybe start, because Pike is on your list first, maybe do the Pike one, the other one. Do we want to do the option 1 image? I think that's on there too. Just if we close this one out and we could see that option 1.
Yeah, Pike was one of the firms that provided a facade appearance, a rendering. I think most of them submitted facade renderings. Some submitted 3 different options. One firm didn't submit anything. And again, Pike, in this case, gives their view of what they can do or what they're thinking. It's certainly not etched in stone. It could be very much subject to how the village wants to change it. Their 3 options had some canopies also. Canopies could be nice. They're a nice architectural feature, but they don't last that many years, and they are a maintenance issue with, you know, the fabric material deteriorating over time in the weather and in the environment. This one that you see here, this is a relatively open first floor on both South Broad Street and Hudson Street. Some of the other renderings, the other 2 renderings they presented, there was a little more closing up of that, so it didn't appear that open. All 3, or actually all 4 respondents were looking at parking structures that are relatively open so that they did not require a sprinkler fire suppression system, if I recall, or mechanical ventilation, because those are 2 very large costs that by having open facades like this, you get a natural movement of air, and you're not required to put those in by code.
But because this is a redevelopment zone, anybody that we might choose to go with, we could negotiate with them directly and make changes, you know, how we see fit.
As I understand it, yes, that is correct.
Do you have any idea why Prismatic didn't submit a rendering?
I have no idea. I did not ask them. They did put in 2 small floor plans at the very end of the proposal, just to give an idea of a space layout. I'm not sure. There wasn't one in my packet, and I guess there wasn't anything in anybody else's packet, so there wasn't anything in their overall submittal.
And did they have the opportunity to ask if any other work has been done on the site? Because when I read through it, it seemed like the bulk of their proposal had to do with geotechnical studies and environmental studies and surveying, and isn't all that work done by us already?
A great majority of that work is done, you are correct. Prismatic, I think was one of the respondents that asked a number of questions and had asked for the geotechnical information we had and also the environmental work that the village had done.
Yeah, I had a question on the bearing capacity.
Oh, on Pike?
Yeah, so my question on the bearing capacity is, if we were required, if that work were required, that's not in their proposal, because presumably that's a costly endeavor.
Well, there's 2 ways to look at, they quoted a bearing capacity of 4,000 PSI, pounds per square inch.
Mm-hmm.
That's a pretty darn good hard concrete. They may have actually intended to put 4,000 pounds per square foot. That would be relatively consistent with what the Mazer geotechnical report had mentioned, where they recommended a bearing capacity of 3,500 pounds per square foot. It could be a simple typographical error on Pike's part. Again, that is, as I said earlier, as we go forward with these, there are questions that we have to propose to all the responses to get clarifications. And that's certainly one that should be done, because if they're truly anticipating that bearing capacity, that could make a significant cost difference in their proposal.
Even from the square, even if it's just a typo to foot, if it's a typo, it still has that same impact.
If they intended actually to say 4,000 pounds per square foot, they're very close to the 3,500 that Mazer recommended. It still would require a discussion as to how or what they would need to reach their bearing capacity if it was 4,000 per square foot.
So I think there are other options for Pike that
You want to
there are copies.
click on the other option too.
Yeah, right.
It's upside down, so.
This is one of the options, and this one they show like retractable awnings along the South Broad Street facade. They also show the South Broad Street a little more closed in on level 1. There's a moderate knee wall, and there's also moderate, a little higher knee wall, it appears, on the Hudson Street side. Again, there's still sufficient opening to maintain that natural ventilation.
You know, can we just do me a favor, can we just go back to option 1 a minute? Because I'm glad you brought the knee wall up, because I had a question about that. Can we go back to option 1?
Probably the same question I had when I thought.
Yeah.
I
So
saw
when
it.
I see this with missing the knee wall, and this was the least expensive option, but when I see that missing knee wall, that immediately caught my attention, because I feel like cars would go straight through and either hit somebody and then fall off the curb.
That could be that is a valid concern, because it does appear very open. The only thing between the deck and the sidewalk is some shrubbery.
Right.
Certainly nothing that would stop a vehicle misdirected.
I mean, obviously, that would not be a optimal design.
Yeah.
Right, I mean, from a safety.
But wouldn't they place one of those cement things that you see in most parking spaces? You mean like a wheel stop?
Wheel stop.
Yeah, a wheel stop. A wheel stop is good if the car is moving relatively slow, just a couple miles an hour. But I think to the mayor's concern, if somebody's coming through the deck, driving to exit, miscalculate their turn, and they have some speed, they are going to exit through not an exit.
I mean, I guess that could happen in any parking lot realistically, but to me, that almost, because your line of sight is already compromised because of the posts. So you wouldn't even see somebody walking past.
Yeah, I mean, there is a concern, because that is a heavily pedestrian trafficked area.
Okay.
So, I was actually just in Chicago, and there's a building, I think it's called the Honeycomb, and it's got a parking garage that's like 16 feet in the air, or 16 stories in the air, and they have simply, and I have a picture, I'll show the council, it's like a wire, it's literally just a wire that goes, it's double wire, and you look up and you see, it's like a famous building, and you see just the wire going across, and all the cars parked right up to it.
Yeah, but heavy wire, actually, like a heavy aviation cable or whatever that is, can stop a vehicle, but, yeah.
And you can, because it's
So
decorative.
I see
mean,
what you're saying, so you would be going like two across. I get it.
Chain
Okay, got
across,
it.
yeah, because when I looked at it, the first thing I thought is if there's two people exiting the exit and somebody's in a hurry, then
Yeah, you just put the,
across the second block.
yeah.
That's true. This design could appear to encourage poor driving behavior.
Can we go to the next picture?
Hey, Chris, I have a quick question for you. You don't anticipate any environmental issues or geotechnical issues with this site, do you? I mean, based on the prior...
Not significant ones. We did do the environmental investigation with First Environment. We do have some historic fill, also some minor contamination that should be cleaned up during any kind of construction work. We did commission a geotechnical report from Mazer. They did come back with the bearing capacity I mentioned. Other than Pike, the other respondents were looking at conventional shallow spread footings.
Yeah.
That's why, like, as I said, in the conversation that goes forward, if the council is more inclined to one respondent over another, we'd like to make sure with them, send them the geotech report if they haven't gotten it, confirm that all their assumptions match what our investigation has done, and also see that they don't want to replicate the investigation, because that's just an additional cost.
Yeah, I'm concerned if both of those things, if we find out, you're assuming there's not going to be any major issues, so it's going to be very minimal cost.
At this time, we're thinking minimal cost with the environmental issues.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And the footings, conventional shallow spread.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Can we go to the terminal one? Let's just see.
Before we move on, questions for Bob. Bob, I saw on the budgets and estimates from Pike, they presented different financing options. One of them is the interest only, and the other one, short-term financing. But they had an interesting one, was 3-year lease term with no amortization, simple interest, and then a balloon payment at the end of those 3 years. Where have you seen, because, part of the challenge with this is kind of building up reserves to in the process of construction to kind of hit the ground running once the project is complete. Where have you seen this approach being used, a combination of this and then eventually kind of picking up with long-term financing?
I have not seen it before. This is unique to them. I think even in their first pass to us, they didn't address that. They had a short term and they had a long term. So this would be very advantageous to allow us to, like you said, build the equity that we need to pick up the financing when it comes due. I will remind you that you can, as part of Century Redevelopment, talk to the other three and see if they want to come up with any ideas that may match that. If we get to that, if you find one that you like better and they can address the same thing, then you can do that.
Why don't we just explain to everyone what this design is?
This is the design prepared by Desmond, who partnered with Terminal Construction. For those that have been following this project, there should be some familiarity in what they see. Desmond was the firm that the village had utilized prior, and their design at that time was not what the village wanted. They've now come back with another design. Simple comparison to the Pike, there's a lot more frills to it, maybe, more architectural features. Of course, those can increase the cost of the project.
As we see. Great. What was their number on this one? Okay, all right.
So this is the most expensive option. This is 11.5 million, right? And the second one was 10.9?
Most
For
expensive
terminal?
was the other one.
For terminal, yeah.
I don't have those numbers in my...
Yeah, it's 10.9 and 10.1.
No, the most expensive one was Prismatic, no?
Yes.
That didn't
That
give
was
us
14.
they didn't give us a design, right?
But they
Right.
didn't give us a
We,
rendering.
no pictures.
Just trust us.
Yeah, we didn't trust them. Okay. All right, and so this is one that many folks are familiar with already, because it is the original design. And this is fitting the 100-foot depth, right?
Aren't they asking for an overhang in this to cantilever over the sidewalk?
Let me see if Terminal is the one who did that, because I know one of the respondents did have, I think Prismatic, Bob's correcting me, Prismatic had proposed a little bit of a cantilever to give some square footage to provide a more optimized layout.
Get 240.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, this design has probably every bell and whistle that you could possibly want, so if it was our decision that would want to scale it back, scale the design. I mean, it really reminds me of the terminal in Hoboken, actually. That's a beautiful building.
Can we see the second one, the 10.9?
Right, that would be let me just see, Epic,
Yeah.
Epic. Oh, no, I'm sorry.
this
Same
is-
one.
Oh.
They have,
Yeah.
this is option 2, this is the
Oh, I
10.9
know.
version, so
Yes,
they
this is scaled back.
scaled back
So
on the
that's the
frills.
scaled down one.
Yeah. Very scaled back.
And if you go to 10.1, looks like the
The
international
10.1,
terminal at Newark Airport. Go to the next one, 10.1.
it may look much more Spartan. And again, I guess they're trying to present to the village
Right.
what the costs are for a more aesthetically pleasing view of the deck than the plain utilitarian functionary one.
You know, I mentioned to my council colleagues that the garage at my office building is very basic, but and our buildings are very ornate, so it fits. You know, being so basic isn't a bad thing. So, you know.
Bergen County just did a second basic garage down at the county complex. The first one was about 6, 7 levels, very white, stark exterior. And the new one is similar design, but I think a little more softer colored.
Next one, yeah, that's, 10.1 million.
You know, I mean, you're not seeing this in color either, so that makes a difference. Start to see that. And it's also different when we're looking at the Pike design, we're not seeing this expanse, so we're not, that may look actually very similar to this, because that's, if you were to color both and look at the openings, they might actually have a very similar effect.
Yeah, this is
Yeah.
open, just as
Yeah.
the deputy mayor
Yeah.
was saying, you know, it's open and
Okay.
you can easily do it.
All right, so just one more time, the price option 1, price option 2, price option 3?
11.5, 10.9, 10.1.
Got it, okay, good.
Again, I don't think the council should think those prices are hard and fast, because I
Right.
think there's still a lot of negotiation before you select someone, and in that selection process, decide how the facade will be, how the interior will be. There's some things I discussed with Heather that we have to look at, is like, what kind of lighting levels do we want? There could be standard lighting levels of, say, 1-foot candle per square foot, or what I've learned very much from my wife in parking decks, a lot of people like more light. My wife doesn't see too well, she doesn't like parking decks, so, you know, to make that kind of customer base comfortable, we may need to consider a little upgrade in lighting, offset that with other changes elsewhere. Again, all part of the final setup.
You know, I think the benefit of understanding the pricing, not that it's written in stone, but more relative to the, what the difference in that money gets you in terms of the bells and whistles and the visual aesthetic. So I think that's because you start to see, well, this gets me that, this gets me that, and so it becomes only relevant to that extent. All right, so.
But you're correct, Mayor, like, with the terminal Desmond presentation, you have 3 levels, literally like buying a car, you got your 3 trim levels.
And we're going to go to the last one, which is Epic.
Epic actually took a very interesting approach. They took a historic photograph of the old firehouse, and they replicated many of those design elements and extended them down the Hudson Street facade. And again, it's pretty to look at.
Yeah, I actually think that they, in terms of design, if that's all you were looking at, when I saw the original firehouse, the Pike design has the Federici incorporated into the corner, but this one kind of nailed it, with the exception of that glass tower. I really careful. But I think this is particularly beautiful, simple, beautiful.
I mean, they also used what looked like ornate grates on the first level to maintain enough airflow through, again,
Right.
to avoid the cost of the mechanical ventilation. And it provides a different view than some of the other proposed facades.
Questions on this one?
Let's see, the next one, there's a different, they gave us 3 facade options.
Oh, maybe they didn't scan all 3. So they're basically the same, they just have different variations of color, but it's the same design, they just have different variations on color and grates, but it's similar. And what was this was their most expensive option?
That's
was
12.4.
12.4. So it's basically the same design, it's basically the same design, the other two, just for the public. Okay, Any questions on this one?
I guess, I think this is the one that had the, they didn't offer financing information other than we can connect one bank who they work with. So I think it'd be worthwhile to reach out and see what kind of options Connect One Bank could be willing to offer, if any. And then that way we can, have apples to apples, because I know we have Pike at least offering a financing option to figure out which would work best.
Well, I mean, it might be worth it to maybe just bring them all in, because there seems to be questions on everything that are kind of open that they would be, they're developers, so they would be the best to answer and best suited.
I agree, actually. I just had a quick question, though, on, we have a note, and Epic did not provide information about a dry pipe sprinkler system, but did the others actually provide?
Yes.
Okay, so,
It was referred to in several of them.
I'm sorry?
Two of them referred to a dry pipe system. One had a standpipe only.
Right, standpipe.
And the standpipe, I'm a little concerned about because it's only in a stairwell, so there would be in two locations of the deck. If you had a fire condition from the standpipe, the fire department would manually have to run or carry a hose from the standpipe to the fire source.
Right.
A dry sprinkler system covering all the floors and deck would be able to get water on a fire condition quicker. Our fire department is very quick with the response time.
Right.
But a dry sprinkler system would be faster.
And just that dry pipe system just doesn't require any heating because the water's not actually in the system, is that what that is?
Yes, it's a drain system.
Right.
It's usually like plugged with air.
Right,
and
right.
if a fire condition happens,
on
the
full.
sprinkler head releases, all the air rushes out, and then the water would follow thereafter.
Is there another, is that dry barrel?
Excuse me?
Is that dry barrel, or is there another term for that system?
There's a couple. I'm familiar with it as a dry system.
Right.
And it's good for areas that can get below freezing, which this deck can. So you don't want a traditional wet system in here, because if the pipe freezes, as soon as it thaws, you're going to have a wet mess.
Okay.
I just wanted to mention with Epic, I thought one of the interesting things that they proposed was a valet assist to help
from valet
with
to
the relocation of the people who currently park in the Hudson Street lot, and that was actually included in their pricing. So I thought that, and they were the only ones to provide something like that, so it was unique.
Be nice if all four of them did. The other three.
Well, again, it's subject to negotiation, so certainly, that's something you can discuss with each individual. So,
So Heather, I
Go
actually had a note, and it goes to this whole big picture. When will, going back to that Walker report, when will we have the corrected version of that? Do we have an idea when they're?
yeah, we were saying February 28th, and that's when we're going to have them come in to our work session.
So that's when they'll have it available?
No, we'll probably have it before that,
Okay.
but we'll probably discuss it on the 28th.
So I think that what I would like to do is, if we have Walker on February 28th, I almost feel as if we need to hold off on deciding when we're going to have any presentations by developers for the project, because we really need to wrap our head around the financials first. Did somebody sneeze? God bless you. I thought somebody sneezed. So if that works for everyone, I think that's, yeah, just because I don't think it doesn't make sense to take people's time until we know, what those numbers are and then what's really feasible here. So just as a thought. Okay.
So I guess what I need to know from the council is, do you want to interview all four? Do you just want to do three? That's up to you. And then we can get dates after February 28th, when all of you will be available. And, I think whether it's three or four, we could do it in one evening. Give approximately an hour to each one and just do them back to back and, go from there.
Why don't we meet with them before the 28th? I mean, I'm not too concerned about their valuable time. I mean, our time is valuable as well. I think moving forward, things might hinge on the Walker report, but I think there's a month worth of time that we're going to waste, because after the Walker report is out, then we're going to have to wait another couple, 2 or 3 weeks to move forward? Why don't we do the interviews before that?
Well, we don't really, we can't because we have, February 7th is a work session, then the 14th is a public meeting.
We'll do a special meeting.
It would be a special
meeting,
meeting.
yeah.
It would be just that, on that meeting, it would be just the interviews.
Just garage.
Yeah, just garage.
Well, let's, I'm,
Okay with that. Yeah, why not?
okay, let's
Well,
figure it out.
I'll
We
give
also need budget dates too, right? We haven't.
Yeah, we're
we
gonna have to
get
start our
calendar
budget
dates for
meetings
the
as well,
budget, and
right.
we have to, like, kind of consider all those things.
Correct.
So, but I mean, my inclination is to say, let's get the financials first. I mean, I feel strongly about that.
But their financials, I mean, they have to propose to us. You know, if you said it's gonna cost you 10 million, let's just take a number up. It's gonna cost 10 million to build the garage and they come back and say, well, I can't do it unless I get 11, then it's moot. If, as Ramona's saying, have them come in, talk about the designs, talk about the what-ifs, and say, by the way, you know, we're also meeting on this financial report. The two have to go together. You know, they have to be together. And that's why having them in on one night in a special meeting makes a lot more sense, because you can literally plow through it and...
So I think I disagree, because the Walker report already made an assumption on an amount that the garage is going to be built at, and it already made those assumptions for what the meter increases would need to be and to what time those meter increases would need to go to. So if they're saying $1.75 or whatever until 8 p.m., they've already made certain assumptions in that, and the question is going to be, ultimately, is this number going to come in less than that? Is it going to come in more? But I think that we need to understand I mean, for me anyway, I think it's important to know what those financials, what those numbers are. I think there's a benefit to understanding that report first.
No, and it's not that we're not going to do that due diligence. It's a very crucial part of the process. The point is to wait on doing this, which will take us one evening, to wait another month, to wait to see what Walker's going to say. I mean, listen, I don't have the greatest confidence in what Walker is giving us anyway, being honest. I mean, I worked out the spreadsheet on my own, and should have given me the $13,000. But the point is that all this work we've done already, to stall it for another month. All we're doing is going to have interviews with these guys and figure out what it is that they're going to come in at. The beauty of this is that we get to negotiate. That was the whole point of declaring the area in need of redevelopment, to give us that leverage. And for them to understand, look, you're not the only game in town. There's 2 or 3 or 4 other guys that we're talking to. Give us your best numbers, and then it's not a promise. You know, we got kind of moving forward to see what it is that we can afford and what we can pay. But at least I have all that knowledge wrapped up. And then, look at the Walker report. But we're not stalling for another month on making progress that we could be, moving forward on this.
I don't see it as stalling, I just see it as due diligence, but, so anyone else?
I mean, it's budget season too, so I mean, there's a lot, we haven't gotten any of the budget numbers yet, and it's already the end of January, so we have to start doing that too. So I mean, you're talking, we have to figure out what our schedule's gonna be, because there's gonna be a lot of meetings. If we're gonna have multiple budget hearings, and then we're gonna have garage hearings, and then we're gonna have our regular meetings, and then plus committee meetings and everything else that we do. I mean, it's just, February's gonna be a busy month for us.
Why don't we do this? Why don't we definitely have the Walker report on the 28th?
Right.
And then why don't we get the budget schedule and figure out who of these, if maybe even 1 or 2 of them could come in on the first date, and then maybe we can do another 2 at a different date on a regular meeting. Because I think that's special.
I think the special meeting is a better way to do it, honestly, because this way it's all that night, it's all done.
Yeah.
And, and honestly, if you bring 4 in, let's say, and you like 2 the best, you can always bring them back at a, whether it be another work session or it be another special meeting, whatever you want to do.
So, okay, so why don't we definitely put Walker on for the 28th,
Right.
and then we'll take a look at what the budgeting schedule and
Right.
everything else looks
Right.
like, and then we'll go from there.
I'm going to send out dates to everyone, so
Yeah,
this
good,
way we
okay.
can determine when our dates are available, and for both budget and also like a special meeting night just for the garage.
So I'm in favor of doing the special meeting for the garages. I mean, or sooner the better, so.
And so I just need to know, what does the majority want? Do you want to do all four? Do you want to do three?
Sure, do all four.
You may as well do all four.
I do all
Everyone
four.
says four? Okay.
Yeah.
There's
Okay.
questions on all four of them, so bring them all in.
I mean, the other reason to get it set, whatever date we do it, is so that we can notify the developers that they're to come in there.
hear you.
It's, the reason to do it is to let the developers know what date they need to come in. So that's why it's important to set the date, so that we can let them know they're prepared.
It might be better for the public, too, to do them all in one night, and I'm thinking about it on a special meeting, so that's fine, that's
Okay.
fine. But we'll
Okay,
figure that
so
out
I'll
once we
send
have
out
that other...
dates, and then we'll figure it out
Okay,
from there.
good.
Okay? Okay, any other questions in general, or? Okay,
Thanks, Chris.
You're welcome.
thank you.
Thank you.
The next item is the amendment to the municipal complex parking. There's been a request to establish the 2 parking spots next to the handicap parking spot in the municipal complex parking lot. One was previously designated for motorcycle parking as visitor parking for Village Hall, limited to 1 hour, Monday through Friday, 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. In doing so, we could eliminate 2 of the 6 that are in the middle, because we'd still have a total of 6 for visitors, and this way there would be 4 in the middle, and then the 2 across where the motorcycle parking was. They're right next to the handicap spots, and they really are the closest, actually, to the entrance to Village Hall. So if the council's in agreement with this recommendation, we'll do an amendment to the ordinance.
Absolutely.
Yes? Sounds good?
Yes.
Okay. The next item is budget reserve transfers under budget. This is an annual resolution to transfer money in the 2017 budget from departments with excess funds to departments that need funding to pay 2017 bills.
Okay. Anybody questions, comments? Nope.
Okay, the next one is sewer fees for significant dischargers. Village has an ordinance establishing a fee structure based upon equivalent dwelling units for commercial, industrial, minor and significant discharges to the village's sanitary sewage collection system. Nonprofit and tax-exempt properties are also billed. The rate was set at $4.27 per 1,000 gallons of flow, in excess of 109,500 gallons, which I believe is the average flow. Is that correct?
That's a calculated average, yes.
Calculated average flow, discharged from commercial nonprofit properties, and it's during the consumption during the 2 winter quarters. After examining the operating costs, Mr. Rutter-Southers comes to the conclusion that it should remain at $4.27 per 1,000 gallons for 2018. So no change in the charge.
Questions, comments?
Okay, the next one is awarding a professional services contract for upgrading the traffic signals, and then also proposed intersection upgrades. So upgrading the traffic signals, the village had previously awarded survey work for 2 intersections along Franklin Avenue. The surveys have been completed. The survey drawings were forwarded to Bergen County. This is for North Broad Street and Franklin Avenue and Oak Street, Franklin Avenue. The next 2 intersections that need base map surveys, so no new traffic signals can be designed, are East Ridgewood Avenue, North Maple Avenue, and North Maple, Franklin. They're critical traffic congestion location, so the village's surveyor, Daniel Dunn, has indicated that he would do this for $17,100 for both intersections. This is for the survey. The quote is high due to the distance from each intersection. Information needs to be developed for transition zones and turning lanes. So this is to award a professional services for the survey work to Dan Dunn.
Okay. Questions, anyone? This is nice. This is like kind of progress, right?
Exactly.
It's a good thing.
The county's on board.
I know. It's like really just amazing, so it's exciting. Great.
So the next part of this is the upgrading and the Bergen County conceptual plan for the the intersections of East Ridgewood Avenue, North Maple Avenue, and Franklin Avenue, North Maple Avenue, along the North Maple Avenue corridor. The concept plan was actually prepared by Bergen County, and the proposed improvements will require land takings at the southeast corner of East Ridgewood Avenue and Maple Avenue, as well as northwest corner of Franklin Avenue and North Maple. It's also been reviewed with the Enclave project team because there is road widening proposed along the Enclave frontage. The traffic signals will be integrated with one another. They'll have actuators to detect traffic approaching them and include pedestrian walk and don't walk signals. So at this time, this proposed plan, again drawn by Bergen County, they want to know if the village council is in favor of this plan, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
The plan is a concept plan. The previous item, the survey work, may change that a little bit, may change some of the takings. The final design has not been done because they need the base survey map and also the AutoCAD files to design that on. But the concept plan is something that the county feels will work well with their goals for those streets and those intersections.
Okay.
The other thing that's critical is once the next step I'm waiting from the county is a shared services agreement that will need to be executed between the village and the county. That agreement will further delineate each entity's responsibility in this project, as well as a shared services agreement for the two intersections that Heather mentioned earlier on Franklin Avenue.
Well, I have a question just with regard to the status of Enclave with the planning board. Does this change, or is this a deviation at all, or an amendment to what they've got approval for before the planning board? With the road widening, I think that's what the only change is, right?
There is no additional road widening proposed for the Enclave site. It's widening the physical road that we see from the current face of curb to face of curb, widening that within easement takings that have been long established.
So it's in the right of way.
It's within the right of way, correct.
Okay.
So, Matt, would that be in the resolution?
Well, if it's within the, every road really has a right of way, and we have the ability to go in there and move it open, open it up or use it for whatever we need to.
Right.
I just didn't know whether this was something, I wanted to make sure that the applicant knew.
Well, we're going to be memorializing it, I think, next Tuesday.
That's correct.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we're memorializing, what we're doing is memorializing support for this concept plan.
No, I believe Councilman Voigt is saying they're memorializing the resolution for the Enclave approval.
Yeah.
Well, first, the Enclave project team was on board with this. They were part of this. Correct. They've seen this.
Yes, they were present with the last meeting with the county.
That I was not aware. And
so they were in those, they were participating in this, and I think the issue was during site plan review is that, if I recall, the steps are in the road widening easement.
That is still a challenge that their site engineer has to resolve.
They have to resolve.
The Enclave has to resolve to the county's satisfaction.
I think that we call for it, and I have to go back and read the resolution because we probably...
Just as long as it's consistent, and that's really what we need to do.
Right.
Yeah.
So, okay. Just so I understand, because I wanted to go back to one piece here, Chris, because the talks with the county went down not just to this area, but down that corridor to Oak and Broad. So, I'm sorry?
Yes, to Oak and Broad.
Okay.
That's why, as I said, we're going to look probably at a interlocal agreement for this intersection corridor, and then a separate one for the other ones that Heather mentioned at Oak and Franklin, Oak and Franklin, North Broad and Franklin, that we've already had the survey work done, that we've submitted to the county.
Right, but it's all, so just so I'm clear, but all of this happens essentially together, that's the plan, right?
Pretty much concurrently.
Okay, fine.
Because the key thing is, Franklin Avenue is also in dire need of resurfacing. And we'd like, if we're going to go improve any signalized intersections, have that work done, the conduits installed, then we'll have to do the ADA ramps, and at the very end, a resurfacing. It would be poor planning on all parts if the county resurfaced Franklin Avenue, and then we decided 2 years later, dig it up because we want to put a conduit in.
So, not to push our luck with anyone, but when we have that one last light on the opposite side, that's all part of that network on the West Ridgewood. So is that?
That's been like a peripheral discussion.
Yeah, I know.
I think that's something we could revisit further with the county once the various pieces for these four lights have been approved by the respective bodies, and design work is underway.
Okay. And then just in terms of the land taking that we have to do, what is that, how long does that take?
I would defer it to the village attorney.
The land taking?
Right, because we
With
have.
regard to that's a matter of, a document preparation and that type of thing. I don't think it's going to be a very long process.
Okay.
So Chris, just to be clear on this, the light that's at West Ridgewood Avenue on Wellesley Square,
Yes.
the county's aware that that may need to be upgraded as well. Is that correct?
Yes, that has entered the conversations.
Okay.
But we all realize that with the other four intersections we just discussed, those have a greater need. That one has a slightly lesser need. But once we get these, as I said, further underway, we'll take up the discussion with that intersection. And also,
Yeah, so that would happen after the fact or in conjunction with the other four lights?
I would think, I can't say when it would be in the time frame. I'm sure the county wants to concentrate on these four right now, but once, say, the construction work is happening at these lights, the design work could be going on for West Ridgewood.
Yeah.
Because of those are two separate tasks. They're not going to run into each other.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Sure.
All right, any other questions? None?
Okay, so we'll have a
We're good.
resolution for that. The next one is the professional services contract. This is the annual contract for the tax assessment map, again, by Dan Dunn. This charge is $1,700, and it's remained the same price for the past 9 years.
Questions or comments? Moving on.
Okay, the next one is for, it actually says purchase of tires, or state contract, but it's actually parts and supplies. So this is the annual resolution where we indicate which items under, parts and services. So it indicates which various state contract parts and related services we'll use. Tires are one of them, but there's other things, with Brush Company, Route 23 Auto Mall. It's a whole bunch of various services and parts that are purchased by our fleet services during the year.
Okay, questions or comments?
I didn't see the Knutson Tire Garage on here. I guess you haven't made the state contract list.
The next one is horticultural supplies for 2018. Bid proposals were accepted last year. That was year one, 2017. So this is for the second year, 2018. It's not to exceed $38,000 from the village, and then $9,500 for Project Pride.
Okay. Great. Any questions, comments?
Okay, the next one is to consider a fee change for the sanitary sewer connection fee. That was adopted in 2009. The current connection fee is $5,000 per dwelling unit. It's been 8.5 years since we've increased this fee. And so the proposal is to increase the connection fee by $1,000 to $6,000 per dwelling unit, with a corresponding increase for commercial property gross square footage increases. Part of the reason for this is our water pollution control facility is aging and maintenance costs are increasing, and also the mere fact that we haven't increased the fees in almost 9 years.
Any questions?
Everyone's in favor of doing so? Okay.
Moving.
So we'll have an amendment to the ordinance. The next one is the authorization resolution for the acting municipal court administrator. This is the same person as we designated last year, which is Kimberly McWilliams. This only occurs if our municipal court administrator and our municipal court administrator are not available. That's the only time this would come into play. It's $35 an hour. It's, not very likely it's going to occur, but under the court rules, we have to designate the alternate, so this is, or acting municipal court administrator. So that's what we're doing.
Yep. Any questions, comments? Moving on.
The next one is a school security officer for the Ridgewood Public Schools. Councilman Hache and I met with Dr. Fishbein and Vincent Longto, the president of the board. They mentioned that they were interviewing retired police officers who have a Class 3 designation for the position of school security officer. They are paying approximately $50,000 per year with no benefits, and they asked if the village would be willing to pay one half of the salary for the school security officer, and this would be instead of placing a school resource officer into the Ridgewood schools. And obviously, a school resource officer is one of our police officers who would be in the schools. So this is up for discussion.
Yeah, so the original thought behind having a school resource officer, obviously, it's community building. It's bringing in, the help from the police department to help, build that community bridge. Particularly with the high school. Ridgewood High School is a particularly interesting place because it's open campus. It's bringing in a retired police officer as a security guard. I mean, it could serve a function, but I don't view it as the same as replacing, the school resource officer concept. So I think that, on the one hand, I think, the Board of Ed might be justified in hiring that officer for other reasons. But I think we should still pursue the option of approaching the Board of Ed and seeking, this partnership to bring a school resource officer into the schools. That's the only reason why I wanted to put it on the agenda tonight.
I was in an earlier meeting with Dr. Fishbein and Vince Longto, the president of the school board, and I think that you and the village manager weren't present, and there was some preliminary discussion of this, and I raised the same issue that our first, going back a year and a half, 2 years ago, we were talking about our school resource officer, and they were asking us to, when will that person be available, and we were actively trying to address that need, and did address that need, and we're ready to roll with it. And I think that, I agree, I think that they play a vital role in the middle. A school resource officer, one of our police officers, plays a vital role in the school setting, middle schools. I think actually even more so the middle schools. They get to know our police officers. They get to be comfortable with our police officers, and there's a big difference between a retired police officer and one of our current active members of our police department.
So Ramon, help me understand what they would do specifically, the resource officer, some of the duties that they would have.
So, I mean, it's connecting with the kids. You might even have them come in and do a particular, training on specific things. The beauty of it is, the more comfortable you are in talking to this officer and you build that rapport, the more likely you are, if you're a kid who sees something that's going on, to report it. It's a very different approach to just saying, hey, someone got hurt, call security guard. It's to have this recognizable face. So ideally it would be somebody who's a constant face.
Yeah.
It's like you're rotating an officer through shifts. And that's a primary objective. It's to build that community sort of link to the police between the students.
Would they mostly be in the high school, or would they be in the middle schools?
Middle school as well,
All over? Okay, yeah, got it.
So just for many of us that have very fond memories of Officer Chris McDowell, I know some of the parents whose kids are a little bit older, had Officer McDowell was our school resource officer for so many years. I don't know how many, Heather, do you think?
Quite a few, and actually before that, former Mayor Killian, as a police captain, was an
the school
SRO
resource
also.
act, yeah. And they play another role too, is that when there's a problem occurs, they are instrumental in kind of bringing sides together and sifting through the details and offering, I guess, a more professional approach to what may or may not happen to a juvenile. So I think that there is a very, very real professional piece to that, plus the face of the police officer in the building.
And I think they have a higher level of interactivity with, kids and families who might need that level of intervention maybe at some point, and if they're getting in trouble in school, than simply having a security officer who's going to nab somebody who's getting in trouble or doing something they're not supposed to on the school grounds, and then just kind of like handing them off to the school administrators or the parents or the police. If it rises to that level, you would have somebody there, and just the deterrent of having, high school kids, middle school kids might take a uniformed police officer more seriously than, a security guard, even though he might be a retired police officer. If you see somebody in uniform, it just has a different impact.
Yeah, and actually, and just thinking about the training, because the more current training for police officers also revolves around social media and those issues, and those are very real in the schools. So that current training is also more relevant to the things that happen today as opposed to what may have been our experience or our kids' experience or my kids' experience, not yours, youngins. Okay.
And when we were on the previous council, when we were on the previous council, we approved the school resources officer, and that's
we
what
approved
we're
it.
gonna split the cost with.
Yeah, we approved it, so.
So Heather, how does it work? How does it work with, they're looking obviously just for cash from us. How does that work? It's not, is it an employee of the school?
Well, you mean the school security officer?
Yeah, so it says
They're looking for half of the
they're gonna pay them $50,000
$50,000
a year, and they're looking for us to pay $25,000.
$25,000,
And in
correct.
fact, we wanted to flip that because we were going to ask the Board of Education to fund part of the school resource officer.
Correct.
And that was our very early conversations with them when we were re-implementing and trying to fulfill that, and we approved it. One of the things we said, that I had that conversation, and Councilman Hushay was there, and Heather was there, that we would look to the Board of Education to actually pay into that. So this money that now is being allocated to this retired police officer in lieu of a school resource officer could in fact be reimbursed to the village taxpayers for that
But is it a Ridgewood? It doesn't say that it's a Ridgewood police
They
officer.
actually indicated that no retired Ridgewood police officers had applied.
So it's not a Ridgewood police officer?
No.
And is there any, because I recall from the prior time I was on the council when this came up, one of the challenges was that if it is a police officer and specific laws are broken, then they would have the ability to arrest students. And they didn't want that in the school. They didn't want them to have that ability. So this is just going to be a civilian that's a retired police officer. That's not, it's obviously not Ridgewood because they didn't apply. So what is do we have any obligation or anything legally?
To pay,
Sorry, Matt.
to pay for the security?
Yeah, because we're paying a salary.
I guess you're talking about like in
Well,
terms of
I think whether you use a police officer or hire somebody to do this, you would be obligated to pay them for their time. So it would more than likely be a full-time position, and there would be benefits involved.
You asking for like liability?
No, I'm asking,
you're
I'm
asking about
asking,
liability,
it's
like
not
if-
our employee,
if
it's
they
a
do
school, it's a
something
Board of
wrong.
Ed employee.
Board of Ed employee, right.
For the
Or a Board of Ed
sport.
employee is something different, and they would undertake that on their own.
So they don't become, by virtue of us reimbursing them the $25,000 to cut to the chase, that does not constitute becoming a village employee. They're still a Board of Ed
I think there
employee.
can be it's almost a shared services
Right.
agreement type situation that gets worked out. We've done that in other instances where one declares them as an employee and the other one helps pay and
Right.
supplement the income.
But I mean, my inclination is to go back and, this is not something that's of interest. I mean, I don't know about anyone else, not of an interest, and we would be more inclined to say, we did as you asked, and we pursued putting back a school resource officer and reinstating that position, and, we did it in good faith, good faith, and we should be going back to them and asking them. As a matter of fact, maybe on the next meeting, we should ask. Okay.
Okay. Everyone's in agreement with that?
Yes.
To go with the SRO?
Yes.
Okay. So the next one is awarding contract for on-call traffic services. We passed a resolution in June of 2017 to award a contract to Petrie Traffic LLC for on-call professional traffic engineering services for July 1st through June 30th of this year. Petrie Traffic LLC actually changed ownership and now operates under the name of Brightview Engineering. Aaron Schreiger is the licensed professional engineer, and therefore, Mr. Rooney, rightfully so, has considered asked the council to consider a new resolution appointing the new firm and retaining such licensed engineer through the period ending June 30th, 2018. John Jarr is a partner with Brightview, and he'll continue to assist in providing traffic-related services to the village.
Any questions?
No, it's fine.
Okay, moving on.
Okay, the next one is under policy. Each year, volunteers made up of our Parks and Recreation staff and family members, as well as neighboring residents, host a water table on Fairfield Avenue for the runners of the 10K Memorial Day Run, which is sponsored by the North Jersey Masters Group. Because of this, to thank us and them, the North Jersey Masters has donated some of their proceeds to the community center, and this is to help fund programs as needed. So it's a $1,000 donation, so this is the acceptance of that donation.
Questions, comments?
The next one is authorizing the NJDEP treatment work permit application processing for multifamily housing. So the multifamily housing projects, which are recently being approved by the Village Planning Board, will require various permits to the NJDEP. Process requires an authorized representative of the village to review and sign the permit applications. The recommendation is to have the village engineer execute the permits on behalf of the village as needed.
I just had a question. Who else is qualified? I'm just not questioning that it's Chris, but I'm just wondering who else is qualified in the village to be authorized to do this? Is there anyone else?
Okay. So,
okay, so let me, okay. And but this is, okay, all right, thank you.
okay.
Any
So everyone's okay?
Okay.
All right, the next one is, we'll skip it till Mr. Rogers comes back. We'll go on to the no-knock solicitation ordinance. There's been a suggestion that the village council consider a no-knock ordinance. I know the Borough of Hillsdale does have one. Basically what happens is that the borough clerk and administrator collects, prepares, and maintains a list of addresses of those premises where the owner has notified that they do not wish soliciting and canvassing on his or her premises. To be included on the non-solicitation list, the resident completes a form, and then they indicate that they don't want to have solicitation at their home. Then what happens is that the municipal clerk then forwards that to the police chief on a quarterly basis. The police chief then notifies all potential solicitors that this is, these addresses, they cannot knock, they cannot solicit at these locations. The updated list may be given more frequently if there's a lot of people signing up all of a sudden, and any solicitor or canvasser violating the provisions of this section can be punished by a fine.
Just as a little, oh, bless you, everybody's sneezing tonight. Just as a little background on this, a couple of weeks ago, there was quite a flurry of activity where residents in a particular area were having a lot of solicitors knocking on the doors, and in one instance in particular, I think the resident, supposedly, the story goes, that asked them to leave, that not interested, and there was a little bit of almost an aggressive stance that was taken, and I think it was two people at the door. Is that
correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
And so, I was kind of observing this, and it then became a little bit of flurry of activity on our favorite Facebook pages. And a resident emailed me, and I said, you know, it's funny because we were just discussing a no-knock ordinance, so this is an opportunity to have a list. Now, with this list, one of the questions that came up is, these are actual solicitors, but could you distinguish from the one, like the kids, the band?
That's a question for Matt. I don't
yeah.
know if we can say any commercial solicitors we wouldn't allow, or, you know, if you did a no-knock, you don't want commercial ones, but you're willing to have the high school kids
yeah,
or
right, high
whoever's
school.
going around.
You're running into some due process issues with regard to that,
Okay.
and that's one of the
I mean,
things
most
you have
of
to be
us-
very careful of.
Yeah, I mean, most of us are getting our Girl Scout cookies now via email, right? I think a lot of people just send emails. The kids aren't really coming around door to door so much.
No, they come around. The poinsettias, the
Oh, yeah.
Right, the fruits.
Band-
I
band-
know, Boy Scout popcorn was definitely
Popcorn.
at my door every year. Okay, so, yeah, but I guess if you're, so just kind of thinking this through, if someone, a solicitor comes for a license, does the band need a license to sell fruit?
They actually don't get a license, but they are soliciting door to door. What they do is they request permission to do so.
Right.
But they don't, but they do solicit door to door, so I think under our solicitation ordinance, it indicates that it's someone going door to door to sell goods or wares, and, I mean, they are selling something. Obviously, it's different from a commercial entity, but
Right,
as
right.
Mr. Rogers is saying, that might be an issue. If you say you don't want anyone to knock, that would include the high school students, right?
Well, I think we put, I mean, it's one of those things that you can always carve out, and hopefully nobody complains, nobody has an issue with it. So you can deal with that. It's just a matter of, you know, how to approach it. What do you want to classify certain things as? How do you want to differentiate between purely commercial things rather than just fundraising for public entities and things like that? So it gets involved, but if you want, you know, I can certainly respond to it, you know, by an email during the week so everybody can read something.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. I've had the same youngster selling me Boy Scout popcorn every year for quite a number of years, and I'd be sad if he didn't come to my door. But I'd be the first one to sign up for no
So Heather, so is this the equivalent, basically, the National Do Not Call Registry?
It's similar.
And then is the homeowner given anything to put on the
No.
door that says?
No, it's just that the solicitors are given a list, that these are the ones where they cannot knock. And if they do, then they're violating the ordinance. The homeowner will know that they registered for that, and they can tell the police, you know, this was a violation on this date and time.
I mean, you can have, if a homeowner wants to, they can put up a sign on their front door saying, you know, we subscribe to the no-knock policy.
Right, no knock.
So,
So I'm just, my concern with all this stuff is, you know, we're good at ordinances, but at enforcement, not so good. And I'm just worried about the extra headaches it'll cause for both, you know, police or whoever is the code enforcement, is the police department? Who would handle the enforcement of this?
It would be the police, because they enforce solicitation.
Well, let's just kind of play this out then. If I'm on the no-knock list, and Councilman Hache comes to the house peddling a garage. So,
Purple ties.
purple ties, okay, we'll go purple ties. So I'm on the list, and Councilman Hache comes with his purple tie, and I say, okay, I could take his card, and then now I could actually go and call the police, and they will issue this. Now, does that mean the next time they come in to acquire a license, are they then flagged? The solicitor should be
Well, we
flagged?
could also suspend the license.
Okay.
And, you know, revoke the license.
Right.
And in addition,
well, you'd have to go
they could
through.
be fined, right?
You'd have to go through a process of, you know, there'd be a violation signed based upon your probable cause statement.
Right.
And that would have to be heard in court. And if it was a violation found by the judge, then possibly there could be something done.
Right, so realistically, if somebody's willing to sign for the no-knock ordinance, then they're willing to pick up the phone and say, get him off my front steps, or he's...
I would think so.
Oh, I mean, I don't know. My feeling is that some people may be willing to make the call and say, these people were here, I'm
Yeah,
part of that,"
exactly. I think they'll pick up the
And then leave
phone.
it at that and leave it alone, because they
Right.
don't want to get involved in having to come to court.
No, but then the police are there, and they, they
But you
make...
still have to adjudicate it in court.
No, but based on whose complaint.
You're talking about a police response, though, so if someone knocks on your door, if Councilman Haché is knocking on your door with his purple ties, and you call up the police department, and you say, my gosh, police department, we have this man selling purple ties at my house, and I'm on this list, come and get him, are they gonna jump up and show up at your house in 2 minutes to get the solicitor?
But if they issue a summons, I have to show up in court.
You have to
Which
show
is
up in
fine.
court to
Right,
testify.
I understand that. Right, okay.
So if this is going to be implemented, I would imagine these people who put their name on this list would need to know that they may have to go to court for all this, so it may end up being a pain in the neck.
Right.
Yeah, so they just need to be aware of the fact that there's going to be ramifications to them, if they decide to press charges.
I think what normally happens when there is a citizen's complaint is that the police make it well known to the citizen that wants to file the complaint that they have to go to court in order to support it if they want to get anywhere with it.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, mostly we just want that solicitors who are obtaining a license to be mindful of this list that they have and to be respectful of it. And hopefully then it works out and our violations will be few and far between. Good, okay, good. Moving on.
Okay, so I guess we could discuss this again next week with a proposed ordinance?
Work session.
We do?
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so we'll put it back on the agenda for next week. Okay, so the next one is, we're going back to the implementation of the Valley Hospital settlement. So Mr. Rogers is going to speak to this.
Well, we are going to talk about it in closed session tonight a little bit, but if everybody recalls, we did reach a settlement agreement with Valley Hospital in the fall, all contingent upon Valley Hospital being issued favorably the certificate of need that it had filed with the State Department of Health. That certificate of need came down, I believe, last week, and it then implements a number of things that have to take place at this point in time with regard to action to be taken by the planning board and action to be taken by the council. As part of the settlement agreement, if you recall, as we discussed, Valley Hospital needed to and wanted to maintain the same size or same lot and buildings at the present village campus on Linwood Avenue. And so even that after they move, they want to keep the same number of buildings, the same size buildings, and as part of the settlement, that was going to be that the master plan had to be amended to make the present campus conforming with the zoning code, which would require review by the planning board, and then forwarding a recommendation over to the council to consider an ordinance consistent with that. The council would then consider that ordinance, and if we wanted to tweak it, make any changes to it, do anything with it, we'd have to kick it back to the planning board, but there's a number of things that have to go through with that process. So in the next 2 to 3 months, we are going to have hearings with regard to the settlement agreement, and the planning board is going to have to take up the issue of amending the master plan to change the H zone, the hospital zone, to make the present buildings on the campus conforming. Mm-hmm. There's a couple little twists with the settlement agreement that deal with any future development from the standpoint of requirements for a future power plant. You know, they're generating for the site and generating power for the site, and also a exhaust stack that may be part of that. So those are some of the issues that came into it. There was also some planning criteria in terms of conceptual uses for the property that had to be included by the planning board and then included in the ordinance, but those things can be taken care of. So we do have a few things to talk about later on in close, but we do have a few things to talk about in terms of just setting up the time to get all that done, because there are time periods to get all that done. And I believe the planning board has 120 days, and then council has 120 days, thereafter to get all this done. So there's a lot to be done.
Any questions?
Yeah, so Matt, I'm assuming we can talk about a little bit about this agreement, yes?
Yeah,
Yeah,
well, is that the notice? That's
that's a
the
certificate of...
Department of Health certificate of need.
Yeah,
grant,
okay.
right?
So, I mean, the only concern I have, and I know Valley has rather deep pockets, is they're raising the $752 million. You know, they say part of this is $115 million in philanthropic contributions. I'm assuming they can do that fairly readily, but if they don't raise the amount of money, does this kind of void the certificate of need?
Well, I think, you know, all I can tell you is my understanding of the process. And my understanding of the process, and kind of was confirmed when I read the letter, is that the Department of Health did an extensive search and scrutinized rather significantly their financials for Valley Hospital.
Yeah.
And my feeling is that nobody would be proposing this, and nobody would have granted the certificate of need if it wasn't feasible or thought to be feasible. So realistically, if you had a dime, you'd bet it on the fact that they'd be able to get the financing that they need in order to be able to build this over the time period that they want to.
So, but if they don't?
Well, if they don't, I think that's a different issue.
Yeah.
Everything in the settlement agreement has been geared on the granting of the certificate of need.
Yeah.
They got the grant. So,
I'm just worried if they can't get the financing, what does this mean?
well, if they can't get the financing, I can't tell you from the Department of Health standpoint what it means if they can't get the financing when they're supposed to get it.
Yeah, but from our standpoint.
From our standpoint, we've got a settlement agreement, and they are to move to Paramus. And if there's any change in that, then we go back to the appeal.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Okay, our next item is suggestions for use of sycamore tree at Graydon Pool. I'm going to have Dan Cramblett, who's our manager of Parks and Grounds, come up in case there are any questions. As you recall, we had our own arborist as well as an independent arborist determine that the beautiful tree at the island in Graydon Pool is basically very hollow and not viable and a danger because it may fall. So unfortunately, it will have to come down. We had said at the time that we would entertain various proposals from the public, and Marcia Ringel, who's part of Preserve Graydon, went out and notified people, and we got various proposals, including benches or tables or plaques, also possibly having an enlarged photo of the sycamore tree and perhaps different seasons, perhaps even using a frame around these photos made of the wood from the sycamore tree. And so Ms. Ringel unfortunately could not be here this evening. She's suffering from the flu, she indicated, but however, she did say that a couple of other suggestions were one that pieces of the sycamore tree, a slice of the tree could be preserved and left at each public school, and that children then would know that this tree was over 100 years old and they could touch the wood and possibly experience something from that. You know, the council themselves may have ideas as to what they want to do. I just want to let everyone here know, and it'll be put on our website as well, that President's Day, which is February 19th, will be the last day when people can go and, you know, experience the tree, look at the tree, take pictures of the tree, do selfies, whatever you want to do, and then shortly thereafter, the tree will be coming down. So tonight, though, we need to decide what we're going to do. The other thing I want to let you know, we had proposals of possibly making wooden bowls or hiring an artist who does these types of things out of the sycamore wood. Just so you know, it takes approximately 2 to 3 years for the wood to dry before it can be formed into these bowls or, you know, various things. And that's at a minimum. It depends how big it is. It could take up to a year of drying per inch diameter of the piece of wood. So that's something to keep in mind. Obviously, the removal is going to take time for our Parks Department to do so. When it does come down, we certainly don't want any of the public in the area because they have to be focused on what they're doing. This is dangerous for our employees. They're trained and they know what they're doing, but to have onlookers would be very detrimental to their process. So at this time, we're going to discuss what you want to do so that we do the right thing when they take down the tree.
Okay.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. If you have any
Good
questions, I'll
evening.
be happy to address them.
So, just for the record, anybody reading these comments from people that weighed in, couldn't we call Save a Tree and see what they have to say? I grew up in Ridgewood and loved the tree and went away for the summer, so I miss a lot of Graydon, but still love the tree. I mean, some of them are just very nice to read, but...
Somebody said that they thought that you could stake the tree like a tomato plant so it wouldn't fall over.
Yeah.
I think that was one of the comments.
Yeah, and then the seed pods, I know that the seeds we're working on with Jeannie Epiphan, right? Is she?
We are, actually, yes. She has volunteered to take the seed pods and grow some baby sycamore trees.
Right.
And also, if our guys go up into the canopy when they are taking it down, if they find some, Mr. Cramblett has indicated that he'll have some of them preserved as well for Ms. Epiphan.
Yes, and I took the time to actually go out.
Is the microphone on?
I took the time to go out and inspect the site. Again, 4 seed pods. We didn't really find any on the ground, but I did see from the ground several in the canopy. A tree that's 80-plus feet tall. You can't see all of them. They're a very small seed pod, but I believe once we get members of the tree crew up into the canopy, we'll find enough to make a concerted effort to grow at least like a dozen potential saplings.
And I think that the deputy mayor suggested, what did you suggest doing this, growing the trees by recycling?
Oh, yeah, by the nursery.
I thought I saw
but
that
then
email.
Yeah, that might not be optimal because it might be better to just do them in place wherever we're going to place them, maybe somewhere around Graydon.
Okay. All right. So does anybody have any thoughts on some of the suggestions that were made?
I guess the biggest question is if it needs to be dried, where can we possibly store it? Or store pieces of it?
That's a really good question. The village has a construction yard. It is not part of the Parks Department. It would be,
Let me just have you speak up a little bit.
Oh, sorry about that. We have the construction yard. It's not part of the Parks Department per se. It's just part of a different department. So we would be at the mercy of the other departments to use it. That said, we could store some of the wood there for a time. Short of having some very, very fancy kilns to dry the wood, it's just time. You have to worry about security, vandalism, rot, animals, and a plethora of other different factors that could come into play over what could be upwards of a decade for some of this wood to dry. As the manager said, it can be upwards of 1 year per inch. So a 10-inch diameter branch could take 10 years to dry before it could be used to be turned into a bowl or spoon, as some of these suggestions were made.
Oh, go ahead.
Given the hollowness of it, some of the suggestions for bigger things like benches or tabletops or something like that, probably, I don't know if there's enough wood there.
Well, I'll be honest with you. I think a bench would be more of a feasible option between a bench and a table. Tabletop, usually it's done as a live edge slab, meaning you would still have the contour of the tree as it stood. Because as you indicated, the trunk is hollow, we wouldn't be able to slab that out or make a continuous surface. There are polymers and things you can employ, but it would be more acrylic or polymer than it would be wood. That said, some of the larger limbs in the tree could be milled into smaller dimensional lumber, and a bench could be constructed out of that.
I think one of the suggestions I saw from the email today was the Adirondack chairs. I know they're pretty popular at Graydon. If they can make one out of that tree and it doesn't leave the site, right? It stays in its home, and people can enjoy it throughout the years.
Still have to dry the wood.
Things of that nature and that size are a little bit more feasible because you can use a smaller diameter. You don't need the trunk to have the large tabletop.
And it might be more feasible to store smaller limbs than big slices of the trunk somewhere, big, like half of the tree trunk or something like that.
Correct. The other factor is with the trunk and saving the trunk. I'm not saying it's not within the realm of possibility, but because it does have the large crack on the north side of it, once we go to remove it, we don't know what's going to happen. In my experience, and I've removed more than my fair share of sycamore and or London planes, which are very, very similar in their nature, they can be brittle. So when they hit the ground, which we would try to minimize that as much as possible, but not to the detriment or safety of any of the members of the community or the Parks Department, it can shatter. It can break very easily. So that's something to just kind of keep in the back of our heads, that while we could take every precaution possible, the wood is going to react the way it wants to, and the location is not optimal for removal of a tree. We're talking about it's in the middle of Graydon, it's in the middle of sand. Our equipment is not four-wheel drive, meaning the big log trucks and bucket trucks. At the time of purchase, it wouldn't have made sense to make that expenditure.
So, my thought is, and I was actually going to ask you about that brittle shattering, I guess whatever happens to it, the way it dries out. That's specific to that type of tree, right?
It may or it can happen to any tree. I've just seen, in my experience, and arborists I've spoken to as well, that sycamores just tend to do it a little bit more. Because they're such a strong, dense wood, they shatter when they hit the ground.
So, you know what, because you can actually, I know you can kiln dry, it could be. So I'm wondering if when Marcia sent the email with the gentleman, Khan, was that his name? She said, you might want to commission. It's quite possible that he would take the smaller pieces and actually go through that process, because it doesn't make sense to me that he's doing this and not using a kiln to dry this out and waiting I don't think he's waiting 10 years for his wood to become available. He's going to do these more quickly. So maybe he's someone that we reach out to and just say, look, here's the wood, there's an interest, what do you want, or he takes it, it's his, and with the expectation that he lets us know when some product will be available for our residents to purchase. I mean, I don't know if that's one option for the better part of the trunk. I mean, it would seem to me that if he's making bowls, he must be drying it out.
I actually have a colleague in another town whose husband does this type of work, and I asked her how they dry it. And she said they keep it outside for a good 8 to 9 months, and then they bring it into their garage for additional time. She said that they had wood from last August, and and then they bring it into the house, and then it was in the garage. So 9 months, approximately 9 to 10 months, and the tree still had moisture in it. So he still couldn't use it. So it could be up to a year just to dry it. The other gentleman may have a kiln, I don't know, but if they do it naturally, it's definitely, she said, between 2 to 3 years before they can use the wood that they get. So, but certainly we could reach out to him, and he had indicated, or Marcia had indicated that he would want to at least look at the tree so that he could say, this is part of it that I would be willing to make something. And I guess at this point we could give it to him if the council's agreeable to just give him the wood as opposed to purchasing it or whatever, since it's coming down. And then we could, he could do what he wants. Perhaps he could, 2 years from now, if that's how long it takes, possibly sell it at a street fair or something and say this is from the iconic sycamore tree.
Or he can make it like a link available on his website that says, here's the tree. I had another question though. On the finer branches, a lot of times you see during the holidays, there's like the white branches and they're tied up in a bow. Are those, is it feasible to take some of those branches and just do a little ribbon around those and hand them out to first come, first serve? Or is that are those too brittle as well?
Mayor, I think there would probably be enough to salvage. It would be more a matter of time and manpower, collecting that kind of stuff up. Our tree crew consists of 4 people.
Right.
And to be able to bundle up enough that the community, if there was the interest in that, it would feel like they all had the opportunity to partake, would be a large undertaking. And we'd have to also just continue on with the rest of the tree work within the village.
And what if we, and what if we took some of the, maybe, the branches and just cut them, like maybe into smaller pieces and put them in a basket and told anyone if they want a piece, the basket's in Village Hall, come in. I mean, that's a pretty simple approach, too.
I think with the manpower and the equipment that we have, I think that would be very feasible, yes.
Right, we could just get a really nice basket and maybe make pieces and put a little bow in the sycamore tree. Then they could wait 10 years for it to dry.
Well, then maybe we contact this other gentleman too, and if he wants to take some bigger pieces on himself, and he can either dry them out or hold on to them and then craft them into spoons or bowls or different things like that. We could kind of go both routes. If somebody wanted a piece more immediately, they could come and get a piece more immediately, and then if they wanted to wait until this process goes through, then they could do that too.
I mean, I'm kind of thinking maybe that's do that and then cut those pieces up, put ribbons and put them in a basket, and everybody can take a piece of the sycamore tree.
Sure. All I need to know is how many you would like to have. That's easy enough.
How many can you cut?
How many would you like?
Probably a lot. No, well, why don't we figure that out, and then we'll figure out what color, like the Ridgewood sycamore tree with a little tag. We'll make them nice, and people can just take them.
Absolutely. I think that's something that's very feasible, yes.
Yeah. Keeps it a little simpler.
Find volunteers to tie ribbons.
Bernie. The solicitor.
I don't want the tree down.
Neither do I, honestly.
Yeah, I don't think anybody does.
I was very, very unhappy when we initially found the condition of the tree.
So why don't we just figure out what, we'll reach out to, what's his last name?
Mr. Khan, I believe.
It was Khan,
yeah.
okay. So why don't we reach out to him and then take a look at if we were to cut those kind of pieces and do that, how we would execute that.
You're saying about 5 or 6 inches in length, something like that?
Yeah, just like, as if
Short.
you took a piece of wood like this.
Right.
Like you cut a piece and you put a little ribbon around it with a tag that says iconic Ridgewood Great and Sycamore Tree, and then somebody has that and they can, take it home.
Okay. So I think that's how we'll pursue it. So I will get in touch with Marcia to get his information. I think she may have already given it to us, so.
I think it was maybe the one she just sent.
Right, so I will reach out to him and see if he's interested, and then Dan, I could just have him get in contact with you before the 19th to look at the tree and kind of indicate what he might be able to use. And buy now.
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay?
Yeah.
All right.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. The next one is a grant application for Sustainable Jersey, and Councilman Seaton is going to report on this.
Right, so this is basically the same thing that we did last year. We were unsuccessful in getting the $20,000 grant from PSE&G for the tree survey. So this year we have the Millennium Strategies as our grant writer, and they had already reached out to me and asked me if I had the application from last year, which I did, so I sent them the information that we had. And we're going to try and the Shade Tree Commission and Green Team and REACT, we're in agreement that we should try and go out for this grant again. So it would be a similar situation to last year.
Okay.
If we get the grant, then, we'll budget for it and we'll do the tree survey. And if we don't get the grant, then we just go back to the drawing board. But I think this might also cover other grants too, because there's a plethora of smaller grants from PSE or from Sustainable Jersey that are about like $2,000 grants for a whole range of different activities that you could do. So because there's so many different grant opportunities, we could use this to maybe just cover them all.
Okay.
Questions, anyone?
Just remind me, does that require a resolution by the governing body to apply?
I believe so.
Okay, so we just need to know timing so that we get it on the right agenda.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay, great. Any questions?
Actually, I think we should probably do do this sooner rather than later.
Okay.
at least for the PSE&G grant through Sustainable Jersey.
So if you could send or template, do you have some information from Sustainable Jersey about it?
Yes.
Then if you could send that to the deputy clerk, that would be helpful to create the resolution.
Okay, good. I'll
Okay,
send all.
thanks.
Thank you.
Very good. Moving on.
Okay, the next one is establishing hours for the placement and removal of waste containers at the curb. Currently, we have recyclable and vegetative waste containers that have times when they can be put out at the curb and then also must be back on the resident's yard. We do not have this for garbage cans. Obviously, during ice and snow events, we request that residents bring their garbage cans to the curb. There are some residents in Ridgewood who always bring their cans to the curb. That's their prerogative, that's their choice. Unfortunately, many times, those who bring their garbage cans to the curb let them remain there for several days. And it just doesn't look nice, and we've had a resident who was dismayed about it and asked if something could be done. So this is for discussion by the council. The proposal is to place them at the curb no earlier than 5 p.m. the day before the collection, and they must be removed from the curb by 10 p.m. the evening of the collection. So I think those times are reasonable, so I just want discussion and guidance and see if you agree with these times, if you agree we need the ordinance. As I said, unfortunately, some residents don't bring them in right away, and so they're out there for days.
Mm-hmm.
So, questions, discussion?
Well, this pretty much mirrors what we already do for recycling and yard waste.
Correct.
So you would just be adding basically the last container that's not covered.
That's right.
Anyone, I see it very differently. I feel like there are people that bring their garbage curbside, and that's actually, in many ways, a good thing. And then if somebody thinks that their garbage pails are out too long, then, it could be a sign that something is wrong. You knock on a neighbor's door, you check up, you do a well check on them. I don't know, I feel like people who are taking, because if they left their garbage cans in their rear yard, and our collectors went and picked that up, they would be pulling the big orange bucket, and they would dump, and they would put the pails back. But in a way, they're helping along, or maybe they feel like they're helping, they're doing something good. So we're actually could create a deterrent from people who are willing to move their garbage to the curbside.
It's the same times, though, as our vegetative waste and our recycling, that we require them to put them out and bring them in.
And if they don't, they get a ticket?
Well, they can.
Yeah.
They can, yes. Right now, we can't enforce it.
Ticket or fine, or?
They can get a ticket.
Yeah, it's possible, but the point is right now, there's nothing, because, vegetative and recycling, we can do so if need be. And with the garbage, there's nothing that we can do.
So what happens if somebody goes on vacation and the cans stay out there? If someone goes on vacation, you're going to have to hire somebody to come retrieve your garbage cans?
Well, they could leave them in the backyard if they were going to be on vacation, because we do still have backyard pickup.
We have rear yard pickup.
Oh, but let's say, and it only happens really when we have this massive amounts of snow. So we have bigger problems when it does happen. I have to go leave town, and now my garbage can is sitting there because I didn't come back to retrieve it. If I come back and find a ticket?
You may, but again, if you were going on vacation, you could leave them in the backyard and they'd be picked up. And then it wouldn't be an issue.
No, but obviously we're talking about the instances when they come forward and you have to retrieve it yourself because you left them out there because of, I know we're trying to protect our village employees from
You're
slipping
saying
in the
ice and snow.
Right.
This is all year round, though. There's some residents all year round who bring it out to the curb, and then it'll stay out there for days. It's not just ice and snow. I mean, it does happen during ice and snow, I understand, but it's up to the council, whatever you wish to do. If you feel you don't need to do so, then that's fine.
I mean, it doesn't sound like it's rampant. It sounds like it's a couple isolated incidents where, as the mayor was saying, maybe the neighbor could knock on the door and say, bring your garbage in, or you have a problem bringing your garbage in, I could roll it up your driveway for you, or...
Yeah, I mean, we do that. When we see, my husband sees somebody's pails out for a couple of days, he walks across the street and he
by the
puts them
garage.
in the garage or by the garage. I mean, we just do that because you're kind of, I mean, not to say that you want to be policing everyone's garbage pails, but I agree, I don't think it's a rampant issue.
I mean, I take my garbage out to the curb most of the times when I remember. Sometimes I forget and it doesn't make it out to the curb, but, you know, it's a lot easier to take it back than to take it out. So I don't know what the issue is, why it would be out there for days on end anyway.
Yeah, it could be that people just forget, or they drive by it and they're rushed, so rubbish recyclables shall be placed at the curb shall not be placed at the curb prior to 5 p.m. on the night before the scheduled or after 6 a.m. on the date of the scheduled collection. The day of collection, all containers must be removed. I don't see this. I don't see a lot of pails out in the streets all the time. I think, maybe just a friendly reminder.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm getting the feeling the answer is we don't need an ordinance for this. Is that correct?
Correct.
No.
Okay, that's fine. So the next is manager's report. I want to report that our parking permits for the premium annual parking permits, which are for the train station, Hudson, and Prospect Street lots, the limit is 210 permits. We have 2 premium permits left, and that's $1,000, but actually it'll be reduced because as of February 1st, which is tomorrow, it'll be reduced by a 12th, so whatever that cost might be. Other permits are still available that cover parking lots, parking permits for the other lots. That's still in abundance, and we don't really limit them. We opened bids for coinless app for parking this morning. We received 5 proposals. This is to replace the Park Mobile possibly still have Park Mobile. The proposals will be reviewed internally and then brought to the Village Council for discussion at the February 7th work session. We hope to have a vendor in place by March 1st. That's the goal. I just wanted to mention a couple of promotions that have taken place in the village recently. Nancy Bigos has been promoted to the position of Director of Parks and Recreation. Dawn Citrullo has been promoted to the position of Director of the Health Department. She has also been named as the Health Officer for the Village of Ridgewood and has recently been reappointed as the Registrar of Vital Statistics. In our Fire Department, Jason Kane, Joseph Ferraro, and Vincent Krug have been promoted to the position of Fire Lieutenant, and Brendan Corcoran, has also in the Fire Department, has been promoted to the position of Fire Captain. So I hadn't mentioned those earlier, and so I just wanted to mention that. I just want to say our leaf collection, we are done picking up leaves through February 28th. If you wish to get biodegradable paper bags, you can put your leaves in the bags, put them at the curb, and call our Streets Department at 201-670-5585. They'll come and pick up the bags. You may also bring them in barrels to the recycling center. When there's snow and ice on the ground, please bring your garbage cans to the curb. If it's snowing in the morning, I would recommend you bring them to the curb because as the snow builds or if it's icy, our crews start slipping and sliding. They will not pick up the rear yard garbage. I also ask, just keep in mind, as long as you have a clear path to your garbage cans in your rear yard, our crews will go and get them. If it's still icy and snowy, I just request that you please bring them to the curb again. And I thank you all for taking our safety of our employees into account. Our senior van service to the Ramsey Interstate Mall, we're reducing this program to 2 Wednesdays each month because there really hasn't been the demand for every Wednesday. As a reminder, this is being paid for through a grant from Age Friendly Ridgewood, and it is free to the user. So all they have to do is contact 201-670-5500, extension 203, to make a reservation. And I just want to note that we will have holiday closures of Village Hall and village offices on February 12th in observance of Lincoln's birthday, and February 19th in observance of President's Day. There will be no garbage or recycling collections on these days, and the recycling center will also be closed.
Okay. Moving on to council reports. Councilman Voigt?
Thank you. So the Library Board of Trustees met on Tuesday, the 23rd of January. Discussion centered around the hiring of a consultant to oversee the logistics of the library renovation. This person would be responsible for ensuring that the redesign was up to speed, fundraising efforts, communications to the public on what would be happening, and identification of alternative space if and when the renovation does take place. The 2018 budget is going to be flat from 2017 for the library, so there will be no increase whatsoever. There are a couple of upcoming events for the library. There's a Library Foundation Donor Appreciation Evening on February 9th at Betsy and Jim Giordano's house. There's an upcoming fundraising for the Library Foundation on June 16th at the Ridgewood Country Club. The Friends of the Library are going to be sponsoring an upcoming reading marathon for the Ridgewood schools. Info and flyers will be provided to students. Upcoming events at the library include, as part of Black History Month, the Real Voices Film Festival. The featured film will be I Am Not Your Negro, which will be on Tuesday, February 27th at 7 p.m. It's an Academy Award-nominated film, which is inspired by James Baldwin's unfinished manuscript, Remember This House, which is a collection of notes and letters written by Baldwin in the mid-1970s, recounting the lives of his close friends Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, and Medgar Evers. The speaker will be Professor Rich Blint from Columbia University. Ridgewood Arts Foundation event was held on the 28th at Park West. It was well attended. There's about 80 or so people who participated in it. They honored the following people: Roberta Panjwani, who was honored for her work with Real Voices Film Festival. TikTok, which is to introduce culture to our children, was also honored. I would like to thank the trustees for putting on this event. That includes Margie Downs, Linda Bradley, Kim Rice, and Albert Pucciarelli. The Open Space Committee met on Monday the 22nd. They will continue to work on the master plan. There was some discussion on the status of the diversion. I understand we'll be talking about that in closed session tonight. Planning board meeting on February 6th, next Tuesday. On the schedule will be the 200/210 South Broad site plan, which is the building next to Brogan Cadillac as you go directly south. 257 Ridgewood Ave, which is the enclave. We'll be reviewing the resolution of approval. KS Broad, which is next to the train station, also a resolution of approval. Mountain Ave will be memorializing the denial of the subdividing of this particular property. And Ridgewood Water will be discussing installation of emergency generators. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. I have nothing to report this week.
Councilman Walsh?
So we had our citizen safety meeting on the 18th. We welcomed our new member, Melinda Kronk, the HSA Federated President. We talked about our appointments, bylaws, and updates so that we make sure that we're running smoothly. We do get a lot of people at that meeting, so we want to make sure that that we had all the proper membership, people, and updates completed. I just wanted to confirm for Complete Streets, we're on the calendar for February 7th. Is that correct, Heather?
Yes, we'll put it on for February 7th.
February 7th. Okay, so we talked about that, and, obviously, there are many of us that know about our Complete Streets program, but there are many that don't, so a refresher was the idea that we had. We talked about the signal upgrades. We talked about the Van Emberg crosswalk, which should be done this summer at Hampshire. We talked about the county and the intersection lighting, which we already talked about tonight. The pilot for the valet. Train station parking lot comments. Citizen safety wanted to, once SHPA is done with their review, Citizen Safety would like to be able to review any proposed parking configurations so that they can make comments and suggestions to the council. And then we realized that PSE&G has a new individual working with Ridgewood who we don't really have that great of a relationship or a rapport yet, so we wanted to maybe see if we could invite them to have just, coffee or something to that effect. And that's it for citizen safety. And then for Ridgewood Arts Council, we had Eric Coriel at our last artist series. Great presentation. The mayor and the deputy mayor were able to attend, and we had quite a few people, so it was a nice evening. That's all I have.
Thank you. Councilman Hochet.
Just an update on the follow-up from all the feedback we received at the CBD Business Community Forum. Many of the concerns that were expressed to us by the businesses was some of the challenges a lot of the commercial tenants face when they're trying to establish business in Ridgewood. There was even some talk about creating a checklist for commercial tenants. I'm looking at something right now that hopefully we can kind of start to work on with the CBDAC. There was also talk about streamlining the permit application process in the CBD, which at the end of the day is ultimately just going to reduce the time and money spent by applicants. Some of the other things that we had looked into was the ordinances. Some are related to signage, and I know that the mayor had some suggestions on how we can make some progress on that. So we'll be working on that. I'd also had good conversation with our planner because there was also a lot of concerns about our zoning, B1 versus B2, and the permitted uses. And our planner had expressed a couple of months ago here at a public meeting, the concerns in that, our zoning is too specific, and at the end of the day, there's no reason to really differentiate, in uses, because at the end of the day, you normally differentiate uses as it relates to parking, and we know that we have no parking, so it doesn't matter what zone. We're trying to come up with some ideas, and again, reaching out to the planning board to see if we can come up with ways to look at some of the ordinances that are making doing business around here a little bit more difficult. So we'll continue to work on that and report to the businesses as we make some progress. That's it.
Okay. So I'll just follow along that lead. So what Councilman Hochet and I spoke about at the CBD Advisory Committee Business Forum was the idea of forming an ad hoc committee. And initially it was kind of a committee to go through ordinances and to make recommendations or to start to clean out. I think some of our ordinances state you could have a haberdashery downtown and a whole bunch of other crazy stuff. And I think that a number of years ago, the village attorney and I started down this road, but it was a cumbersome process, and with so much other stuff on our plates, it was not something that was really doable, but doing it in an ad hoc basis and starting with the CBD would give us an opportunity to at least hone in on some of the more difficult areas. And one of those areas, well, twofold, was the types of zoning, the permitted uses downtown in a B1 and B2, and what's permitted on the ground level, what's permitted on the second floor, what's not permitted, what's prohibited, and how to refine that to make it a little bit easier. And some of our restrictions actually, in a way, might be causing us a problem because, for instance, in our B1 and B2, there are certain types of businesses that are not permitted. And so those businesses tend to say, okay, well, I'm not going to go for a use variance. They're not going to go through this whole process. And so they don't open shop here, and we wind up with more restaurants. And so we're kind of losing kind of a more mixed-use approach. So we would be looking at that. And certainly, in order to move forward with that, we would like to have the Board of Adjustment annual reports to see what happened there, because certainly for the past couple of years, they should be available, and that would at least lend itself to us some guidance as to which direction we should go in based on any variance relief that was sought, approved or denied. And the other thing was, we were looking at the signage and, some of the ways that we could streamline and simplify our signage process. Right now, it's a little bit all over the place. You can have one sign here, you can't have a sign there. It has to be this big, it has to be that big. It doesn't take into account the size of the space, the building, the style of the architecture. So it really is needs to be fixed. It needs to be refined. So we're going to start to look at that too. And I had some preliminary conversations with our planner as well. And in just a quick conversation, we came up with a solution that we think is really doable. So we'll start to look at that. So we're going to move forward, and I think we're putting together this little ad hoc just at this level to move forward and look at those areas, and then we'll go from there. So maybe everybody has an area of expertise, and they would want to do an ad hoc for, say, one area in code. Maybe you want to take a look at for citizen safety, maybe you want to take a look at parts of the code that apply to that particular group. And with that, my only committee meeting was spec committee met yesterday morning, site plan exemption committee for Bear Burger, and they're going to be doing their work over at, I think it's 15 East Ridgewood Avenue. That's where they're opening at the old Gen Sushi, and it's going to be very neat, so look forward to some really funky garage doors lined up and opening up for open air. They have to resolve a couple of little issues like air curtains for public health and safety. Yeah, bug air. That's the health department. So they're moving forward too, and we anticipate they'll be opening in short order. And so everyone will enjoy Bear Burgers. And so with that, we're moving on to public comment.
It's late, I wrote things down. Bill McCandless, 71 Ridge Road. Thanks for making tonight's documents available, particularly in yellow binders referring to Sunshine, which is a FOIA reference, which I, as a former journalist, appreciate. I hope that packet Bill, can be scanned as a single PDF.
Speak into the microphone.
Oh my gosh, sorry.
Okay.
Thanks for making the documents available. Particularly appreciate the yellow color, which is in reference to FOIA, which as a former journalist I greatly appreciate. I hope that packet can be scanned. Now here I'll ask for more. I hope that packet can be scanned as a single PDF and posted to the website with the renderings from each of the bidders, which were not included. It'd be nice to have. Great to get that. Excellent valet information on the program. It proves to have been a great test, providing a simple and effective A/B test. A/B testing is the simplest and most effective way to understand solutions to problems. And, we now have a Occam's razor situation on our hands, right? It comes into play. The simplest answer is people found parking so easily they didn't need a service. And it's a clear and unbiased data point for the garage discussion. Ample parking exists, and now we have more evidence of it. The large, immediate, and unplanned spend needed for the water treatment for the cancer-causing PFASs is a far more pressing concern to the village. Obviously, that $3.5 million is set to grow. It's a much more important item than any garage discussion. And I believe that like my old card that sneaks up on me and throws an expense at us, this is something we can't plan for, but yet we need to reprioritize. And I will again point out that the village faces a financial difference this year over last based on the end of federal subsidies for state and local taxes, and we need to take this into account as we figure out how much more we're going to ask taxpayers to spend. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Michael Volicue, 250 Hope Street, 23 North Broad Street. I was in my restaurant watching your debate on TV on the valet parking, and immediately I felt the need to come here and share with you my thoughts. My observations are actually based on me literally being there every Saturday, observing, taking notes, trying to help, trying to organize, calling and texting Councilman Hache every day, and finally dragging him out of his house on a Saturday night just to share with me the short things, the challenges we have. It was a good project that unfortunately ended up not having a good result, and in my opinion it was a perfect example of the fallen tree in a forest where nobody was there to hear it. What do I mean by that? The very weak marketing, weak or even inexisting marketing that needs to accompany every single project on today's reality. It was the major cause of not being a success, in my opinion. I spoke literally with hundreds of people, and at the end of the day, the strong feeling was that pretty much nobody knew anything about it. Majority of the restaurants didn't know. Some of the restaurants didn't want to know because they didn't agree with the location. But the most important were the patrons. Without exception, all the patrons I spoke with did not know anything about it. Was nowhere advertised. Once they were in the town, the signage did not help either. And they were small, not clear, very discreet, very hard to read on dark when you drive. If we want to use this one as a learning process, following are my recommendations. Number one, needs to be done on the summer when the activity doubles or triples. Number two, needs to be a little closer to the restaurant hub. I know it's not easy. Number three, probably we need to do it on Saturday only. I think I heard the village manager talking about one day. Excellent idea. Marketing, the marketing needs to be done prior to start it in a very serious way. Eventually, hopefully the forum that we have will help tremendous in educating everybody. And at the end of the day, it needs to be advertised in all the websites, including the restaurant websites. I want to let you know that on the second part of the project, I decided to advertise it on my website, and I end up with 24 cars in half of the period, okay? But then when I watch what my colleagues are doing, I was kind of sad to figure out that I'm the only one, the only restaurant that mentioned and advertised this event. So I think the marketing campaign got to be. I think it's a great idea. I think we should repeat it. I understand it's easy for me because it's your money. I got that. But I think it's a great idea that we have to do it, and we have to do it right, and it can be very successful. Again, marketing, the marketing campaign got to be very strong, so people know in advance what's going on. I think our new downtown website is going to help a lot. But again, if nobody's in the forest, the tree eventually doesn't make any noise. So, thank you again.
Thank you.
Good evening, Boyd Loving, 342 South Irving Street. There's a comment about the proposed no-knock ordinance. When people don't want someone to knock, they don't want anyone to knock. They don't want Girl Scouts to knock. They don't want people who are selling band candy to knock. When they put up the no soliciting sign, they don't want anyone. So I don't know how you are going to possibly differentiate and say it's okay for Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts and the band, but it's not okay for commercial people. This is going to either have to be all or none. So if you're going to do all, you're going to realize that you're going to box out the Girl Scouts and the Boy Scouts and the people who are selling the band poinsettias. They're not going to be able to knock if the person has a no soliciting sign up. It is not going to be possible, at least I think it's going to be unlawful, if somebody calls on the phone and says a Girl Scout just knocked at my door and the police refused to go because it was a Girl Scout at the door. If you have a no-knock ordinance, it is a no-knock ordinance. So before you go down that route, you just got to realize that you're going to be including everybody. I also believe, and the attorney can correct me if I'm wrong, that public utilities are excluded when it comes to no-knock. So the Verizons and the Cablevisions, because they're public utilities, their employees can get around it because it doesn't apply to them. At least I think that's what the courts have said about that. Matt, can you comment on that?
Well, I think there's exceptions made for them, mostly because they usually knock on your door, not necessarily to solicit money, but to solicit assistance and provide the services that they're providing. And, based upon that, everybody needs to have those services in order for, basic operation. So they do usually excuse them. I mean, it's a problem. And as I indicated, you can try it, but as long as nobody complains, you might be able to get away with it, but that's the problem.
Right. Well, I believe that many of the complaints that I hear about are from people who are walking around in the red shirts that say Verizon on them or Cablevision. So if they're excluded from it, and they're perhaps the biggest solicitors, it really doesn't make any sense to me. So I just encourage you to watch that very carefully, because you're going to be excluding some people who you might not want to exclude, and the people you do want to exclude, you might not be able to exclude them. Councilman Voigt mentioned tonight about the library. It very much concerns me that the library is involved in this, or discussing now, this renovation project. And not during this meeting, but during a previous meeting, it was mentioned that the library, at least at the time, still has this intent of closing for a period of time during this renovation project, maybe up to a year. I'm hoping that the council gets a chance to review this renovation project before it moves forward. I, for one, would be very disappointed if the entire library is closed for a year. I hope that there is some way that this renovation project could be complete without the library closing down, that a piece could be done at a time. So I'm asking you to take a close look at this renovation project when it comes in, and if there's any thought about closing down the whole library for an extended period of time, that you ask that something else be done. I realize they want to make a renovation, but perhaps they can scale it down a bit so that the whole place doesn't have to close down for a while. Councilman Hache mentioned about the valet parking in terms of the locations that the vendors are using. I believe that the Park West is using the spaces behind Connect Bank. I don't believe that they are using Ken Smith anymore. And there was also, somebody was using the United Methodist Church. So when Ken Smith goes and starts to construct, and Brogan Cadillac starts to construct, that really shouldn't affect the valet people because they have other locations that they could use. $14.5 million is the number you should use to figure out if you can pay for $14.5 million project without increasing parking rates, without increasing the meter time, and without putting an additional burden on taxpayers. As Mr. McCandles mentioned, we have to remember that only $10,000 of property tax combined with state income tax is deductible now. If you're going to be putting an additional burden on Ridgewood's taxpayers to build a garage, it's going to be a lot of backlash. We've got an election coming up. Just remember that people are going to vote their pocketbooks. If there's any chance that their pocketbooks are going to be seriously impacted as a result of the need to, or the desire to build the garage that some of us think is not needed, particularly based upon what happened with the valet parking, 267 cars in a 4-month period, you really got to be careful about that. It's going to be a lot of backlash. You know, you're trying to decide, well, what's this all going to cost? Use $14.5 million. That's the highest number you got. use that as a basis for determining whether you can pay for it or not. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ann Loving, 342 South Irving Street. I believe the report from the library liaison neglected to mention an upcoming event on February 6th, which is this coming Tuesday. There will be a Mardi Gras poster anthology and original works on exhibit at the Ridgewood Public Library during the whole month of February. And on the 6th, a New Orleans Tricentennial Celebration and King Cake Party, which will be open to the public from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. And poster and book signings will be taking place that will benefit the Friends of the Library as well as the Waldwick Museum of Local History, and local artist Andrea Mistretta will be on hand. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. And with that, we will take a resolution to go into closed session.
Be it resolved by the Village Council of the Village of Ridgewood that the Village Council meet in closed session on January 31st, 2018 at 7:30 p.m. or as soon thereafter as the matter on the agenda can be reached, and that said closed session be held in the caucus room on the 4th floor of the Ridgewood Village Hall, 131 North Maple Avenue, Ridgewood, New Jersey. Be it further resolved that the matters to be discussed in closed session are limited to personnel matters to include municipal prosecutor and boards and committees, legal matters to include Valley Hospital, affordable housing, and Ridgewood water lawsuit, contract negotiations to include property acquisition, Green Acres. These matters are allowable under NJSA 10:4-12 et sec. And be it further resolved that the minutes of this meeting shall be made available to the general public when such matters have been deemed completed by resolution of the Village Council. I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you.